Clara Dawson had 37 cents in 3 days to save her daughter's life. The baby in her arms was dying of pneumonia. No medicine, no food, no hope. So she wrote 5 words on a piece of paper and pinned it to the message board downstairs. Words that would change everything. Words that would bring a stranger out of the snow. A wealthy stranger with sad eyes and a secret locked in a box. He did not want what she expected. He wanted something far more dangerous. He wanted to help. But that night in the tavern was only the beginning. The wealthiest man in 3 counties would later say that the beggar woman saved his life. But when he first saw her standing in the snow that winter night, he did not see a savior. He saw himself 2 years earlier when he too had been that desperate. When he too had stood at the edge of everything and wondered if anyone would stop. But that comes later. First there was the cold. Chicago in January of 1879 was a city that had learned to survive. 3 years after the Great Fire had burned it to ash, the city had rebuilt itself from nothing. New buildings rose from the ruins. New fortunes were made. New lives began. But for Clara Dawson, standing at the window of her tiny room on the 3rd floor of a crumbling tenement on the Lower West Side, survival felt like a distant dream. The wind howled off Lake Michigan like a wounded animal. It cut through the gaps in the window frame, turning her breath to white mist with every exhale. The room was no larger than a prison cell and nearly as cold. A single bed with a mattress thin as paper. A wooden chair missing one leg propped against the wall for balance. A small coal stove that had gone cold 2 days ago because there was no coal left to burn. And in her arms, wrapped in every scrap of fabric Clara owned, was her daughter. Lily was 8 months old. She had her father's golden hair and her mother's blue-gray eyes. She had been born in this very room on a sweltering July night, and Clara had thought then that the hard part was over. She had been wrong. The baby's breathing had changed 3 days ago. At first, it was just a small cough, a rattle in her tiny chest that Clara tried to ignore. But the rattle grew worse. The cough became constant. And now, as Clara held her daughter close and tried to warm her with nothing but body heat, she could hear the unmistakable sound of fluid in Lily's lungs. Pneumonia. Clara knew that sound. She had heard it before 16 years ago when her mother had coughed her way through a long winter and never seen spring. The disease always started the same way. A cough, a fever, a rattle that grew louder each day until it was the only sound left. And then silence. Clara pressed her cheek against Lily's forehead. The baby's skin was burning hot, far too hot, and her little body felt lighter than it should, weaker, like something essential was slipping away with each labored breath. She knew exactly what Lily needed. Medicine from Dr. Pemberton's pharmacy on Clark Street. $2.50 for a bottle of cough syrup that might break the fever. $3 for a doctor's visit. $5 a week for food nutritious enough to give Lily the strength to fight. More than $10. Clara had 37 cents hidden beneath a loose floorboard near the stove. She had counted it that morning, laying out the coins on the bed like pieces of a puzzle that would never fit together. 3 dimes, 1 nickel, 2 pennies, not enough for medicine, not enough for food, not enough for the 3 weeks of rent she owed Mrs. Vogel, not enough for anything at all. Clara closed her eyes and let the familiar prayer form on her lips. Please, please let her live. Please let someone help us. Please! But the prayer felt hollow, like shouting into an empty room. She had prayed every day for 6 months, ever since Robert left for California with dreams of gold and promises that rang false even as he spoke them. She had prayed when the letters stopped coming. She had prayed when the money ran out. She had prayed when she lost her job at the textile mill because she could not work fast enough with a baby strapped to her back. God had not answered. Maybe God was not listening anymore. A knock at the door made Clara's heart stop. 3 sharp raps, hard and impatient. She knew that sound. She knew who was on the other side. She considered not answering. Maybe if she stayed quiet, Mrs. Vogel would think she was not home. Maybe the landlady would go away and give her 1 more day, 1 more hour, 1 more minute to figure out how to save her daughter's life. But the knocking came again, louder this time. Clara crossed the room on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. She shifted Lily to one arm and opened the door with the other, already knowing what she would see. Mrs. Gertrude Vogel stood in the hallway like a monument to judgment. She was a large woman in her 50s, built like a dock worker, with a square face and gray eyes that had seen too much hardship to have any softness left. She wore black from head to toe, as she had every day since her husband died 15 years ago, and her iron gray hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it seemed to stretch the skin of her forehead. She had come to America from Bavaria 30 years ago, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a determination to never be poor again. She had worked. She had saved. She had bought this building and filled it with tenants who paid on time or found themselves on the street. She was not cruel, but she was not kind either. The world had taught her that kindness was a luxury she could not afford. Mrs. Vogel's eyes swept over Clara, taking in the hollow cheeks, the dress that hung loose on her frame, the baby wrapped in rags. For a moment, something flickered in her expression, something that might have been pity in another life. Then it was gone. 3 weeks, Mrs. Dawson. You owe me 3 weeks' rent. Clara's throat tightened. I know, Mrs. Vogel. I am trying to find the money. My husband will send something soon, I am sure of it. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. Robert had not sent a single letter in 4 months, had not sent a single penny since August. For all Clara knew, he was dead in a mining camp somewhere buried under a mountain of rock and broken dreams. Or worse, he was alive and had simply forgotten he had a wife, forgotten he had a daughter. Mrs. Vogel's expression did not change. Your husband, she said flatly, the one who left 6 months ago, the one who has not written. That husband, he will send money, he promised. Men promise many things, Mrs. Dawson. The wind promises to stop. The snow promises to melt. But winter always comes back. Clara felt the words like a slap. She wanted to argue. She wanted to defend Robert, to insist that he was different, that he would come through for her. But the words would not come. Because deep down in the place where she kept the truths too painful to speak aloud, and she knew Mrs. Vogel was right. Robert was not coming back. He had never been the man she thought he was. She had seen it even then when she was 19 and desperate for someone to love her after her parents died. She had seen the way his eyes always drifted to the horizon looking for something better, something easier, something more. She had married him anyway because he was handsome and charming and he made her feel less alone. But loneliness was nothing compared to this. Being abandoned was worse than being alone had ever been. 3 days, Mrs. Vogel said. I will give you 3 days, until Friday. If you do not have the money by then, you and the baby will have to leave. 3 days. Clara felt the world tilt beneath her feet. 3 days was nothing. 3 days was a death sentence. If she was thrown out into the freezing streets with a sick baby, they would not survive the week. Please, Clara whispered. Lily is sick. If we go out in this cold, she will... She could not finish the sentence, could not say the word. Mrs. Vogel's jaw tightened. She looked at the baby in Clara's arms, at the flushed cheeks and labored breathing. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she sighed. 3 days, she repeated. That is all I can give you. I have bills to pay. Creditors who do not care about sick babies. Do you understand? Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Mrs. Vogel turned to leave, then paused. She did not look back when she spoke. There is a charity kitchen on Halsted Street. They give soup to women with children. It is not much, but it is something. The door closed behind her with a sound like a coffin lid. Clara stood there for a long time, staring at the wood grain of the door, counting the cracks and splinters. Lily whimpered in her arms, a small sound of pain that cut straight to Clara's heart. 3 days, 37 cents. A baby who might not see the weekend. She walked back to the window and looked out at the street below. The snow was falling harder now. Big white flakes that swirled in the wind like lost souls searching for somewhere to land. A few people hurried along the sidewalk, heads bowed against the cold, not looking up, not looking at anything but their own feet, their own survival. No one was coming to save her. No one had ever come to save her. Clara remembered the day her mother died. She had been 16, sitting beside the bed, holding her mother's hand as the breathing grew slower and slower until it finally stopped. Her father had died 2 years before that, killed by a runaway carriage on Broadway. And just like that, Clara had been alone in the world. She had survived. She had found work as a seamstress. She had met Robert at a church social, married him at 20, and believed with all her heart that her life was finally beginning. Now she was 22 years old and her life felt like it was ending. Lily coughed again, a wet, rattling sound that seemed to shake her entire body. Clara held her tighter and began to rock back and forth, humming a lullaby her mother used to sing. The melody came out thin and broken, but it was all she had left to give. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. But Mama could not buy anything. Mama had 37 cents and a heart full of desperate prayers that no one was answering. The hours passed slowly, measured by Lily's breathing. Each breath was a small victory. Each pause between breaths was a moment of terror. Clara did not eat, did not sleep, did not move from her spot by the window, watching the snow fall and the daylight fade and the darkness creep in like a thief. When Lily finally fell into a fitful sleep just before midnight, Clara laid her gently in the basket that served as her crib. She tucked the blankets around her daughter's tiny form and stood there watching the rise and fall of her chest, counting each breath like a miser counting coins. Then she walked to the cracked mirror that hung on the wall. The woman who looked back at her was almost unrecognizable. 6 months ago, Clara had been pretty. Not beautiful, not the kind of woman who turned heads on the street, but pretty enough. Bright eyes, full cheeks, a smile that came easily. That woman was gone. The face in the mirror was gaunt and hollow. The cheekbones stood out too sharply. The eyes were dull-rimmed with dark circles from sleepless nights. The hair that had once been her pride, thick and brown and shining, hung limp and unwashed around her shoulders. She looked old. She looked defeated. She looked like someone who had already given up. But she had not given up. Not yet. Not while Lily was still breathing. Clara turned away from the mirror and began to pace the small room. Her mind raced through every possibility, every option, every potential path to survival. She could go to the charity kitchen, get soup for herself, try to keep her strength up. But soup would not buy medicine. Soup would not pay the rent. Soup would not save Lily's life. She could try to find work, but she had tried for weeks. Every factory, every shop, every wealthy household looking for servants. They all turned her away when they saw the baby. No one wanted to hire a woman who came with a sick child attached to her hip. She could go to the church. But she had already been there. Reverend Mitchell had given her a loaf of bread and a prayer card and told her to trust in God's providence. She had left with an empty stomach and an emptier heart. There was only one option left, one thing she had that anyone would pay for. The thought made her stomach turn. It went against everything her mother had taught her, everything she believed about herself, everything she had promised to be. But her mother had never watched her daughter dying of pneumonia. Her mother had never had to choose between dignity and survival. Clara walked to the small table where she kept a pencil and some scraps of paper she had saved from the mill. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pencil. Her eyes stung with tears she refused to let fall. She wrote the words slowly, carefully, each letter a nail in the coffin of the person she used to be. Offering evening companionship. Inquire room 3B. She did not write more. She did not need to. The men who understood what those words really meant would understand. The men who came looking for that kind of companionship would know exactly what she was offering. Clara stared at the paper for a long time. The pencil marks seemed to glow in the dim light, accusatory and final. She thought about her mother, about what she would say if she could see this. She thought about Robert, about whether he would even care. She thought about Lily lying in her basket, fighting for every breath. Then she folded the paper and walked downstairs to the message board in the lobby. The building was quiet at this hour. Most of the tenants were asleep or too tired to care about anything except their own survival. Clara crept down the stairs like a ghost, avoiding the steps that creaked, holding her breath as she passed Mrs. Vogel's door. The message board hung on the wall near the front entrance. It was covered with scraps of paper, advertising rooms for rent items, for sale services offered. Clara found an empty spot near the bottom and pinned her note in place. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the pin. She had to try 3 times before it stuck. When it was done, she stood back and looked at what she had created. Such a small piece of paper, such innocent-looking words. No one would guess what they really meant unless they already knew. "I am doing this for Lily," Clara whispered to herself. "Only for Lily." The words sounded hollow even in her own ears. She climbed the stairs back to her room and sat down in the broken chair to wait. Morning would come soon, and with it whatever judgment the world had in store for her. The first person to knock on Clara's door came just after sunrise. She had not slept. She had spent the night sitting beside Lily's basket, watching her daughter breathe, trying to prepare herself for what was coming. Now, as the gray light of dawn crept through the window, she heard footsteps in the hallway and a timid knock at her door. Clara's heart pounded against her ribs. This was it. This was the moment she had been dreading and hoping for all night. She smoothed her dress, ran her fingers through her tangled hair, and tried to compose her face into something that did not look like terror. She opened the door. A boy stood in the hallway. He could not have been more than 17, with a thin face and ears that stuck out too far, and cheeks that were flaming red with embarrassment. He wore the clothes of a dock worker, rough and patched, and he clutched his cap in his hands like it was a lifeline. "Ma'am," he stammered, "are you, are you the one who posted the note?" Clara felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Relief that he was so young, so obviously innocent of what her note really implied. Fear that she would have to explain herself to this child. Shame that she had posted the note at all. "I am," she said carefully. "What kind of help do you need?" The boy's blush deepened until his entire face was the color of a ripe tomato. He looked at the floor, at the wall, at anywhere except Clara's eyes. "My name is Tommy Gallagher, ma'am. I work down at the docks loading cargo. And there is this girl at the bakery. O'Malley's on State Street. Her name is Bridget, and she has the prettiest smile I have ever seen, and I—" He trailed off, twisting his cap in his hands. Clara stared at him for a moment, not understanding. Then slowly it dawned on her. This boy did not know what her note really meant. He thought she was offering advice, lessons in conversation, help for a lovesick young man who did not know how to talk to the girl he admired. She nearly laughed. She nearly cried. Instead, she did neither. "You want me to teach you how to talk to her," Clara said. To Bridget. Tommy nodded miserably. "I try, ma'am. Every morning I go to buy a roll, and I mean to say something clever or charming, but when I see her, I just stammer like an idiot and run away. My friends are starting to call me Tommy the Tongue-Tied, and I cannot stand it anymore." Clara should have sent him away. She should have told him she could not help, that she had other concerns, that her daughter was dying and she did not have time for teenage romance. But looking at this boy with his burning cheeks and his hopeful eyes, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. She felt useful. "Come in," she said, "but be quiet. My daughter is sleeping." Tommy stepped into the room, still clutching his cap. His eyes went to the basket where Lily lay wrapped in blankets, her tiny chest rising and falling with each labored breath. Something softened in his expression. "She is beautiful, ma'am. Your daughter." "Thank you," Clara said. "Now, tell me about this Bridget." For the next 30 minutes, Clara forgot about her troubles. She sat in the broken chair and listened as Tommy described the bakery girl in excruciating detail. Her hair like spun gold, her eyes like the summer sky, the way she laughed when old Mr. O'Malley told his terrible jokes. Clara gave him advice. Simple things. Smile when you see her. Ask her about her day. Listen more than you talk. Girls like to be heard. Tommy nodded at each piece of wisdom like she was revealing the secrets of the universe. When he left, he pressed something into her hand. Clara looked down and saw a quarter bright and new. "Thank you, ma'am," Tommy said. "You do not know how much this means to me." Then he was gone, clattering down the stairs with the energy of youth and hope. Clara stood in the doorway staring at the coin in her palm. 25 cents. Enough to buy some bread, maybe some milk for Lily. Not enough for medicine. Not enough to change anything. But it was something, and something was more than she had when she woke up. She was about to close the door when she heard footsteps on the stairs again. Heavier this time. Slower. A man appeared on the landing. Middle-aged with a beer belly straining against a cheap vest, oily hair slicked back from a receding hairline. His eyes swept over Clara with an expression that made her skin crawl. "You the one offering companionship?" he asked. Clara's throat tightened. This was different. This man knew exactly what her note meant. This was what she had been waiting for, what she had prepared herself for through the long, dark hours of the night. Before she could answer, Lily coughed. A loud, wet, rattling cough that echoed through the room like a gunshot. The man's expression changed. His eyes went past Clara to the basket on the floor. He saw the baby sick and fragile, wrapped in ragged blankets. "You got a kid," he said. His voice had gone flat. Disgusted. "Yes, my daughter. She is not well, but forget it." The man was already turning away, already heading back down the stairs. I do not need that kind of complication. Wait, Clara reached out desperate. Please, I need the money. My daughter needs medicine. I will. She could not finish the sentence, could not say what she was willing to do. The man did not stop. His footsteps faded down the stairwell, and then he was gone. Clara stood into the doorway trembling. She did not know if she felt relieved or horrified. Both maybe. Neither. More people came throughout the day, a wealthy woman looking for a servant who recoiled when she heard Lily cough and fled as if pneumonia were contagious through walls. An old drunk who slurred obscene suggestions until Clara slammed the door in his face. A nervous young clerk who took one look at Clara's hollow cheeks and changed his mind about whatever he had been planning to say. Each visitor left. Each one took a piece of Clara's hope with them. By late afternoon, the room was growing dark again. Another day was ending. Another day closer to Friday, to eviction, to death. Clara sat by the window watching the snowfall. Lily had been sleeping more and more, her tiny body conserving energy for the battle it was fighting. Each breath was a small victory, but the victories were growing smaller. She was so lost in despair that she almost missed it. A man was standing at the message board in the lobby below. Clara leaned closer to the glass, trying to see through the frost and the fading light. The man was older than the others who had come that day. Mid-40s, she guessed, with the bearing of someone who had earned every gray hair at his temples. His hair was dark, shot through with silver at the temples. His coat was well made, the kind of coat that cost more than Clara earned in a month at the mill. Not flashy or ostentatious, but quietly expensive. He was reading her note. Clara watched him, her heart beginning to pound. This man was different from the others. Different from the desperate young clerk or the lecherous middle-aged businessman. There was something in the way he stood, the way he held himself. Stillness, patience, the bearing of a man who did not need to prove anything to anyone. He read the note for a long time. Too long, really. It was only a few words. But he stood there studying it like it was a letter from someone he loved. Someone far away, someone he had been waiting to hear from. Then he looked up. His gaze went directly to Clara's window, directly to her face, as if he had known she was watching all along. Their eyes met. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Even from this distance, even through the snow and the dirty glass, she could see something in his expression. Not lust, not calculation, not the predatory assessment she had seen in the other men. Sadness, a deep, profound sadness that seemed to match her own. And recognition, as if he saw something in her that she could not see in herself. He held her gaze for a long moment, then he turned and walked into the building. Clara pulled back from the window, her heart racing. She heard the front door open and close, heard footsteps on the stairs, heard them stop outside her door. But no knock came. Instead, something else. A soft rustle, a small sound of paper sliding across wood. Clara looked down. A folded piece of paper lay on the floor just inside her door, pushed through the gap at the bottom. She picked it up with trembling hands and unfolded it. The handwriting was neat and precise, the words few. Flanagan's Tavern, 7 o'clock this evening. I will be in the back corner. S.H. Clara read the note 3 times. Then she looked at the clock on the mantelpiece, its hands frozen at 4:15, because she had not been able to afford to have it repaired. She did not know what time it was now, but it did not matter. She would go. She had no choice. Whatever this man wanted, whoever he was her last chance. Flanagan's Tavern sat on the corner of Clark Street in Madison, a weathered brick building that had somehow survived the Great Fire. It was the kind of place where dock workers and railroad men drank away their wages, where card games turned violent after midnight, where women of a certain profession plied their trade in the shadowy corners. Clara had never been inside. She had walked past it 100 times, always keeping her eyes forward, always hurrying her steps. Nice girls did not go to Flanagan's. Respectable women did not know what went on behind those grimy windows. But Clara was not a nice girl anymore. She was not sure she was even a respectable woman. She was just a mother, desperate and alone, walking through the snow toward whatever fate awaited her. She had left Lily with Mrs. Kowalski, the old Polish woman who lived in the room next door. Clara had traded her last good shawl for 2 hours of babysitting. 2 hours. That was all the time she had to change her life. The tavern door was heavy, warped from years of Chicago winters. Clara had to push hard to get it open, And when she stepped inside, a wave of warmth and noise washed over her like a physical force. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of spilled beer. Lanterns hung from the ceiling, casting pools of yellow light that barely penetrated the gloom. Men crowded around tables playing cards and telling lies. A few women lingered near the bar, their faces painted, their dresses cut low. Clara felt every eye in the room turned toward her. She did not belong here. She knew it. They knew it. Her dress was worn and faded, but it was the dress of a working woman, not a streetwalker. Her face was pale and thin, but it was not painted. She looked like exactly what she was, someone who had wandered into the wrong place. But she did not turn back. She scanned the room, searching for the man from the lobby. Her eyes moved past the bar, past the card tables, past the women with their knowing smiles, and found him. He sat alone in the back corner, just as he had promised. A single candle burned on the table in front of him, illuminating his face. He was watching her approach with those same sad eyes, that same patient stillness. Clara walked toward him on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Each step was a small death, a small surrender. By the time she reached his table, she was barely breathing. "Mrs. Dawson," he said. His voice was deep and quiet, the voice of a man who did not need to raise it to be heard. And Clara nodded. She did not trust herself to speak. "Please sit." He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat. Her hands were shaking, so she pressed them flat against her thighs beneath the table where he could not see. The man studied her for a moment. Up close, he looked exactly his age. 45, perhaps. Old enough to have known loss, young enough to still hope. His face was weathered, lined around the eyes and mouth. A thin scar crossed his left eyebrow, pale against his tan skin. He was not handsome in any conventional way, but there was something compelling about him. Something solid and real. "My name is Samuel Hartwell," he said. "And before we go any further, I need to ask you something." Clara braced herself. Here it came. The negotiation. The price. The terms of her degradation. "Tell me about your baby," Samuel said. Clara blinked. Whatever she had expected, it was not that. "I... what? Your baby." Samuel's eyes never left her face. "I saw the way you looked out the window. I heard the cough when I stood outside your door. You have a sick child. Tell me about her." For a moment, Clara did not know what to do. This was not how these conversations were supposed to go. The men who answered notes like hers did not ask about babies. They did not care about anything except what they wanted and how much they were willing to pay for it. But Samuel Hartwell was still looking at her with those sad, patient eyes. Waiting, so Clara told him. She told him about Lily, about the pneumonia, about the fever that would not break, about the rattling breath that grew worse each day. She told him about Robert leaving, about the letters that stopped coming, about the money running out. She told him about the 3 weeks of back rent, about Mrs. Vogel's ultimatum, about the charity kitchen, and the factory doors that would not open. She told him everything, and as she spoke, the tears she had been holding back for weeks finally broke free. They rolled down her cheeks and dripped onto the scarred wooden table, and she did not even try to wipe them away. When she finished, Samuel was silent for a long time. He turned a ring on his finger. A wedding ring, Clara noticed. A simple band of silver worn thin from years of use. He twisted it slowly around and around as if it helped him think. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out 3 silver dollars. He set them on the table between them. The coins gleamed in the candlelight, more money than Clara had seen in months. She stared at them, then at him. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "What do you want me to do?" she whispered. Samuel shook his head. "Nothing. I do not understand. There is nothing to understand, Mrs. Dawson. Take the money, buy medicine for your daughter, pay your rent, feed yourself, but..." Clara's voice broke. Why, Samuel was quiet for a moment. His fingers still turned the wedding ring around and around. "Because 2 years ago my wife died," he said finally. "The same sickness your daughter has. Pneumonia. I had money. I had doctors. I had everything a man could have, and none of it mattered. I watched her waste away day by day, breath by breath, until there was nothing left." He looked up at Clara and she saw the grief in his eyes, raw and fresh even after 2 years. "I could not save her," he said. "But maybe I can help save someone else." Clara could not speak, could not move. She sat there frozen as the words sank in. This man was not here to use her. He was not here to negotiate or bargain or take advantage of her desperation. He was here because he had lost someone he loved, and he could not bear to watch it happen to someone else. She opened her mouth to thank him, but no sound came out. The tears were flowing freely now, blurring her vision, choking her voice. Samuel stood. He left the coins on the table and began to button his coat. "Wait," Clara managed to say. "That is all. You just give me this money and walk away." Yes. Why? It was the only word she could form, the only question that mattered. Samuel paused. He looked at her for a long moment, and something passed between them, something Clara could not name. "Because someone should have stopped," he said quietly. "A long time ago, someone should have stopped for me. No one did. So now I stop for others." He started to turn away. "I will see you again," Clara said. It was not a question. It was a certainty she felt deep in her bones. Samuel stopped. He looked back at her over his shoulder. "Do you want to?" he asked. Clara did not hesitate. "Yes." Something shifted in Samuel's expression. A softening, a warmth. "Then you will," he said. He walked toward the door, and Clara watched him go. Watched the crowd part around him. Watched the shadows swallow him up. Watched until he disappeared into the snowy night. She was still sitting there, the coins clutched in her hand, when the trouble started. Three men had been watching her since she walked in. She had noticed them without really seeing them, too focused on Samuel to pay attention to anything else. But now Samuel was gone and she was alone, and they were moving toward her table. The leader was a big man with a red beard and small, mean eyes. He smiled as he approached, and there was nothing pleasant in it. "Well now," he said, "what do we have here, pretty lady sitting all alone?" Clara's heart began to pound again, but for different reasons now. She gathered the coins and started to stand. "Excuse me, I need to leave." A hand clamped down on her shoulder, pushing her back into the chair. One of the other men, younger but just as rough, had circled behind her. "What is the hurry?" Redbeard asked. "We are just being friendly. Let us buy you a drink." "No, thank you." Clara tried to keep her voice steady, but she could hear it shaking. "I have to get home. My daughter is sick." The men exchanged glances. Redbeard's smile widened. "A daughter," he said. "How sweet. But daughters can wait, can they not? You look like you were having a good time with that fancy gentleman. Maybe you would like to have a good time with us, too." He reached for her arm. And then Samuel was there. Clara did not see where he came from. One moment the men were closing in around her, and the next moment Samuel was standing between them, as calm and still as if he had been there all along. "The lady does not want to talk to you," Samuel said. His voice was quiet, almost conversational. Redbeard's face darkened. "Who the hell are you?" "Nobody important." Samuel did not move, did not raise his voice. "Just a man suggesting you find somewhere else to be." Redbeard laughed. There were three of them and one of Samuel. The math was obvious. "Maybe we do not feel like leaving," Redbeard said. "Maybe we feel like having a little fun with your lady friend here. What are you going to do about it?" Samuel smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. The young man behind Clara grabbed her arm, yanking her up from the chair. Before she could scream, Samuel moved. It was over in seconds. He caught the young man's wrist and twisted. There was a crack, a howl of pain, and suddenly Clara was free, and the young man was on the floor cradling his arm. Samuel turned to face Redbeard. He had not broken a sweat. "I am going to suggest one more time," Samuel said pleasantly, "that you find somewhere else to be." Redbeard looked at his friend on the floor, looked at Samuel's calm, steady gaze, looked at the way the other patrons were backing away, clearing space for whatever was about to happen. Then he spat on the floor and turned away. "Come on," he growled to his remaining companion. "This is not worth it." They gathered up their injured friend and retreated to the far side of the tavern. Clara watched them go, her whole body trembling. Samuel offered her his arm. "May I walk you home, Mrs. Dawson?" Clara nodded. She did not trust herself to speak. They stepped out into the cold night air. The snow was still falling, soft and silent, covering the dirty streets in a blanket of white. Clara took a deep breath, filling her lungs with the clean, cold air, trying to steady her racing heart. "Are you all right?" Samuel asked. "Yes, I think so." Clara looked up at him. "How did you know to come back?" "I did not leave," Samuel said. "I was watching from across the street. I wanted to make sure you got out safely. You were watching over me." Samuel shrugged as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Someone should. They walked in silence for a while, their footsteps muffled by the snow. Clara still held the $3 silver in her hand, her fingers wrapped around them so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Mr. Hartwell," she said finally. "Samuel, Samuel." She tasted the name, felt its weight on her tongue. "Samuel, I do not know how to thank you. You do not need to thank me. Yes, I do. You have no idea what you have done. You have saved my daughter's life." Samuel stopped walking. He turned to face her, and in the glow of the street lamp, she could see the emotion in his eyes. "No," he said softly. "You saved her life. You did not give up. You fought for her with everything you had. I just gave you the tools." Clara felt the tears threatening again. She blinked them back. "I will repay you," she said. "Somehow. When I get back on my feet, I will find a way." Samuel shook his head. "There is nothing to repay. But if it makes you feel better, you can do something for me. Anything. Get your daughter well. Feed her. Keep her warm. Let her grow up strong and healthy. That is all the payment I will ever need." A carriage was approaching, its lanterns bobbing in the darkness. Samuel raised his hand and it slowed to a stop. "This will take you home," he said. "The driver is a man named Michael. He works for me. He will not charge you anything." Clara looked at the carriage, then back at Samuel. He was standing in the snow, his coat dusted with white, his eyes holding that same deep sadness she had seen in the lobby. "Will I see you again?" she asked. Samuel was quiet for a moment. The snow fell between them, soft and silent. "Do you want to?" he asked. The same question he had asked in the tavern. The same question that seemed to hold the weight of everything that had happened and everything that might still come. "Yes," Clara said. "I do." Samuel nodded. Something warm flickered in his eyes, breaking through the sadness. "Then you will," he said. "Tomorrow, 3 o'clock, I will come to see how Lily is doing." Clara felt something stir in her chest, something she had not felt in a very long time, something that felt almost like hope. "Thank you," she whispered. Samuel helped her into the carriage and closed the door. Through the window, she watched him standing in the snow, watching her go. He did not move. He did not look away. He stood there until the carriage turned the corner and she could not see him anymore. Clara leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes. The coins were still in her hand, warm from her grip. Tomorrow she would buy medicine. Tomorrow she would feed her daughter. Tomorrow Lily might begin to get better. And tomorrow Samuel Hartwell would return. She did not know why he had chosen to help her. She did not know what he wanted, what he expected, what any of this meant. But for the first time in months, the future did not feel like a sentence of death. It felt like a beginning. The carriage rolled through the snowy streets, carrying Clara back to her daughter, back to her tiny room, back to the life that had seemed so hopeless just a few hours ago. But nothing would ever be quite the same again. Samuel Hartwell had a secret that all of Chicago did not know. A secret locked in a box in his study, guarded by grief and memory. And Clara Dawson would be the first person he ever trusted enough to share it. Clara woke to a sound she had been praying to hear for days. Lily was crying, not the weak, whimpering cry of a baby too sick to protest. This was a proper cry, loud and demanding, the cry of a child who was hungry and wanted everyone to know it. Clara sat up so fast her head spun. She threw off the thin blanket and rushed to the basket where Lily lay, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Lily's eyes were open. Her cheeks were still flushed, but the angry red had faded to a healthier pink. And when Clara pressed her hand to her daughter's forehead, she felt warmth, yes, but not the burning heat of the past few days. The fever had broken. Clara lifted Lily from the basket and held her close, tears streaming down her face. The baby squirmed and fussed, demanding food with all the imperious urgency of an 8-month-old who had been too sick to eat properly for nearly a week. "You are hungry," Clara whispered through her tears. "Oh, my sweet girl, you are hungry." She had never been so happy to hear her daughter complain. The medicine had worked. The bottle of cough syrup from Dr. Pemberton's pharmacy, purchased with Samuel Hartwell's silver dollars just 12 hours ago, had done what prayers alone could not. The thick amber liquid had soothed Lily's cough, eased her breathing, and given her tiny body the chance it needed to fight back against the infection. Clara fed her daughter with hands that trembled from relief. She watched Lily drink, watched the color return to her cheeks, watched her eyes grow bright and alert for the first time in days. "Thank you," Clara whispered to no one in particular. To God, perhaps, to the universe, to a stranger who had walked into her life and changed everything. "Thank you. Dr. William Mercer arrived just after noon. He was a small man in his mid-50s with a shock of white hair and round spectacles that sat crookedly on his nose. His black bag was worn and patched his coat threadbare at the elbows. He was the kind of doctor who treated the poor, the desperate, the people who could not afford the fancy physicians on Michigan Avenue. He often accepted payment in chickens or promises, and he never turned anyone away. Clara had sent word to him that morning using some of her precious coins to pay a street boy to deliver the message. She had not expected him to come so quickly. Dr. Mercer examined Lily with gentle, practiced hands. He listened to her chest checked. Her eyes felt her pulse. When he finished, he sat back and smiled. "The crisis has passed," he said. "Her lungs are clearing. Another few days of rest and medicine, and she should make a full recovery." Clara's knees went weak with relief. She had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling. "She is going to live," she said. It was not a question, but she needed to hear him confirm it. "She is going to live." Dr. Mercer agreed. "This little one has a fighter's spirit." He looked at Clara with knowing eyes. "She gets it from her mother, I think." Clara shook her head. "I did not fight. I was ready to give up. But you did not give up. That is what matters." Dr. Mercer gathered his instruments and returned them to his bag. He paused at the door. The young man who brought the message mentioned something about a benefactor, someone who helped with the medicine. "Yes, a man named Samuel Hartwell." Dr. Mercer's eyebrows rose. "Samuel Hartwell. The railroad man I do not know." Clara realized she knew almost nothing about the man who had saved her daughter's life. "He did not tell me much about himself." Dr. Mercer was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I know Samuel Hartwell," he said. "Or I knew him once. His wife Eleanor was a patient of mine. I could not save her, but I was with her at the end." His wife. Clara remembered the wedding ring Samuel had been turning on his finger. The sadness in his eyes when he spoke of watching someone waste away. "He told me she died of pneumonia," Clara said. "Yes, 2 years ago this spring." Dr. Mercer shook his head. It broke him losing her. He was not the same man after. Withdrew from society, threw himself into his work. "I have not seen him in over a year." He looked at Clara with curiosity. "But he stopped for you. I do not know why. Perhaps he saw something worth stopping for." Dr. Mercer opened the door. "Take care of that little girl, Mrs. Dawson, and take care of yourself. You have been given a second chance. Not everyone gets one." He left, and Clara stood alone in the middle of her small room, holding her daughter and wondering what Samuel Hartwell had seen in her that made him stop when so many others had walked past. The knock came at exactly 3 o'clock. Clara had been watching the clock for an hour, counting the minutes until the hands reached their appointed position. She had washed her face and combed her hair. She had tidied the room as best she could, arranging the meager furniture to hide the worst of the cracks in the walls. She had even found a ribbon to tie back her hair, a faded blue thing that had once been pretty. She did not know why she was trying so hard. Samuel Hartwell was not coming to court her. He was coming to check on Lily, nothing more. But something in her wanted to look less defeated than she had looked last night. Something in her wanted him to see that his faith in her had not been misplaced. She opened the door, and there he was. Samuel stood in the hallway holding a large wicker basket. In the daylight, he looked different than he had in the smoky tavern. Older, perhaps, but also kinder. The lines around his eyes seemed less like marks of grief and more like the creases of a man who had once smiled often. He was wearing a different coat today, simpler and more practical, as if he had dressed down to visit this poor neighborhood. But the quality was still evident in the cut of the fabric, the shine of the buttons. This was a man of means, even when he was trying not to show it. "Mrs. Dawson," he said. "May I come in?" Clara stepped aside to let him enter. He moved past her with the basket, his eyes immediately going to the corner where Lily lay in her makeshift crib. "How is she?" he asked. "Better. The fever broke this morning. The doctor says she will recover." Something shifted in Samuel's expression. Relief, yes, but also something deeper, something that looked almost like wonder. "Good," he said quietly. "That is good." He set the basket on the table and began to unpack it. Clara watched in astonishment as item after item emerged from its depths. Fresh bread still warm from the bakery, a round of yellow cheese wrapped in cloth, apples so red they seemed to glow, a jar of honey golden and thick, a bottle of fresh milk for Lily, a small package of tea, and at the very bottom, a bag of coal for the stove. Mr. Hartwell, Clara breathed. I cannot accept all of this. Samuel looked at her with something like confusion. Why not? Because it is too much. Because I have not earned it. Because I do not understand why you are doing this. Samuel was quiet for a moment. He finished unpacking the basket, arranging the items neatly on the table. Then he pulled out the single chair and sat down, moving carefully as if he were afraid of frightening her. What if I told you, he said slowly, that I am doing this because I want to feel useful again? Clara stared at him. She did not understand. Samuel looked toward the window, toward the gray light filtering through the frost. After Eleanor died, he said I had everything a man could want. Money, success, a house full of servants. But none of it meant anything. I went through the motions of living, but I was not really alive. I was just waiting for what I do not know, for something to matter again, for someone to need me in a way that money alone could not fix. He turned back to Clara, and his eyes were filled with an emotion she could not name. And then I saw your note on that board, and I saw you standing at the window looking out at the snow, and I knew that you were not looking for yourself. You were looking for someone else, looking for a way to save your daughter. He shook his head slowly. I could not walk past that. I could not be another person who did not stop. Clara sank down onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly weak. She had thought she understood why Samuel was helping her. She had thought it was simple charity, the kind of thing wealthy people did to ease their consciences. But this was something else entirely. This was a man who had lost everything that mattered and was searching for a reason to keep living. Just like her. You lost your wife, Clara said softly, and I lost my husband. Not to death, but to his own dreams. We are both alone. Samuel nodded. Perhaps that is why I saw myself in you last night. A person standing at the edge of everything, wondering if anyone would notice if they fell. Did anyone notice when you were standing at that edge? Samuel's voice was barely a whisper. No one stopped for me. I had to find my own way back from the darkness. It took a very long time. Clara felt tears prickling at her eyes. She blinked them back. Thank you, she said, for stopping for me. Samuel met her gaze, and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition. You are welcome, he said. Lily chose that moment to wake up. She let out a small cry demanding attention, and Clara hurried to lift her from the basket. The baby's eyes were bright and curious, taking in the stranger who sat at their table. Samuel's expression softened as he looked at the child. May I? He asked, gesturing toward Lily. Clara hesitated for just a moment. Then she nodded and placed her daughter gently in Samuel's arms. He held her awkwardly at first, like a man who had not held a baby in many years. But then Lily gurgled and reached up to grab his nose, and something cracked open in Samuel's face. He smiled. It was the first real smile Clara had seen from him. It transformed his features, erasing years of grief and sorrow, revealing the man he must have been before tragedy stole his joy. She is beautiful, Samuel said. He looked up at Clara. She looks stronger today. She is. Because of you. No, Samuel shook his head. Because of you, because you refused to give up on her. He held Lily for a few more moments, letting her grip his finger with her tiny hand. Then he passed her back to Clara and stood. I should go, he said, but I will come back tomorrow, if that is all right. Clara nodded. She did not trust herself to speak. Samuel paused at the door. He looked back at her, and something flickered in his eyes. Something warm. 3 o'clock, he said. I will be here at 3 o'clock. Then he was gone. Clara stood in the middle of the room, holding her daughter, surrounded by more food than she had seen in months. The coal was already warming the stove, and for the first time in weeks, the room did not feel like a tomb. She did not know what was happening between her and Samuel Hartwell. She did not know what he wanted or what she wanted or where any of this was leading. But she knew one thing. She was not alone anymore. The days that followed took on a rhythm that Clara had almost forgotten was possible. Every afternoon at 3 o'clock, Samuel arrived at her door. He always brought something. Bread one day, soup the next. A warm shawl that he claimed he had found in a closet and had no use for. A pair of soft leather shoes for Lily that fit perfectly, as if he had somehow known exactly what size she needed. He never asked for anything in return. He never made her feel like she owed him. He simply appeared, spent an hour or two sitting in her cramped little room, and then left again. They talked about everything and nothing. On the second day, Samuel told Clara about his work. He owned the Chicago Northwestern Freight Company, one of the largest railroad shipping operations in the city. I started as a cargo loader when I was 16 years old, he said, hauling crates on the docks for pennies a day. When I was 20, I became a foreman. When I was 30, I bought out the man who owned the company when he went bankrupt. He shrugged. Everything I have, I earned with my own hands. That is remarkable, Clara said, to build so much from nothing. Not nothing. I had determination and anger. Samuel's eyes darkened for a moment. My father was a drunk. He beat me until I was old enough to hit back. When I was 14, I left home with nothing but the clothes on my back and a scar on my face. Clara looked at the thin white line that crossed his left eyebrow. She had noticed it before but had not known its origin. Someone should have stopped it, Samuel said quietly. Someone should have helped me. No one did. So I decided that when I grew up, I would be the one who stopped, the one who helped. And you have been, Clara said. You helped me. Samuel shook his head. One person is not enough. It is never enough. But it is better than nothing. On the third day, Clara told Samuel about her mother. She loved lilies, Clara said, watching Lily sleep in her basket. White lilies. She used to say that they grow from the mud but stay pure. That is why I named my daughter after them. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was. Clara felt the familiar ache of loss. She died when I was 16. My father had already been gone 2 years by then. I was alone in the world with nothing but a needle and thread and a prayer. What did you do? I survived. Clara smiled sadly. The same thing I have always done. I found work as a seamstress. I made enough to rent a room and buy food. And then I met Robert, your husband. Yes. Clara was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. He was handsome and charming, and he made me laugh. I thought he would give me the family I had lost. But Robert was always looking at the horizon, always dreaming of somewhere else. I was never enough to keep him here. Samuel was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that surprised her. Perhaps you were too much. What do you mean? Some men cannot handle strength. They need to feel superior, needed in control. A woman who can survive on her own, who can endure what you have endured, that kind of woman frightens them. Clara had never thought of it that way. She had always assumed that Robert left because she was lacking something. Too plain, too poor, too ordinary. But what if the opposite was true? What if Robert had left because she was too strong, too capable, too unwilling to pretend she needed saving? On the fourth day, they walked together in Lincoln Park. The snow lay thick on the ground, turning the world into a frozen wonderland. Clara carried Lily bundled in blankets, and Samuel walked beside her close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Eleanor and I used to walk here, Samuel said. He gestured toward a frozen pond where children were skating, their laughter ringing through the cold air. She loved winter, said it made everything clean and new. You must miss her very much. Every day. Samuel's voice was soft, but the missing has changed. It used to be sharp like a knife in my chest. Now it is more like a weight I carry. Still heavy, but I have learned to bear it. Clara understood. She carried her own weight. The weight of Robert's betrayal, the weight of loneliness, the weight of nearly losing Lily. How long does it take, she asked, for the weight to become bearable? I do not know. Samuel looked at her. I am still learning. They walked in silence for a while, their breath making clouds in the cold air. Lily slept peacefully, unaware of the frozen beauty around her. Tell me about Eleanor, Clara said finally. What was she like? Samuel smiled, and it was a smile full of warmth and memory. She was kind, he said, kinder than anyone I had ever met. She saw good in everyone, even people who did not deserve it. She made me want to be better than I was. How did you meet? At a bookshop in Boston? I was there on business, and she was buying poetry. Tennyson, I think. She dropped her book, and I picked it up, and she smiled at me. He shook his head. That smile, I knew right then that my life would never be the same. Clara felt something stir in her chest. Not jealousy, not envy. Something more like recognition. The recognition of a love that had been real and true and lasting. She was lucky to have you, Clara said. Samuel stopped walking. He turned to face her, and his eyes were bright with emotion. I was the lucky one, he said. For 14 years, I was the luckiest man alive. and now I am trying to learn how to live without her." Clara did not know what to say, so she reached out and took his hand. It was a simple gesture, a touch of comfort between two people who understood loss. But when Samuel's fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, despite the cold, Clara felt something shift in the world. On the fifth day, Clara laughed for the first time since Robert left. She did not even know what Samuel had said, something about a horse that had escaped from his stables and led a merry chase through the streets of Chicago, overturning fruit carts and terrifying pigeons. But the image was so absurd, so unexpected, coming from this serious and dignified man, that the laughter bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her and spilled out before she could stop it. Samuel stopped mid-sentence and stared at her. What Clara asked, suddenly self-conscious. "You should laugh more often," he said. His voice was soft, almost reverent. "You have a beautiful laugh." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. She looked away, embarrassed by the intensity in his gaze. "I have not had much to laugh about lately." "I know." Samuel's hand reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. A gentle touch, barely there, and then gone. But perhaps that is changing. On the sixth day, something happened that Clara would remember for the rest of her life. She was sitting on the edge of the bed feeding Lily when she noticed that her shoes had been clean. The worn leather boots that she had trudged through snow and mud, and God knew what else, were sitting by the door, polished to a shine she had not seen since she bought them 3 years ago. She looked at Samuel, who was standing by the window looking out at the street. "You cleaned my shoes," she said. Samuel did not turn around. "They were dirty. You cleaned my shoes." He turned then, and there was something in his expression that made Clara's breath catch. The ash was caked on. "I could not leave them like that." Clara stared at him. This man, who owned a freight company and probably had servants to attend to his every need, had knelt on the floor of her tiny room and cleaned her worn-out shoes while she slept. No one had ever done anything like that for her. Not Robert, who had always expected Clara to take care of him. Not her father, who had been too busy working to notice such small things. Not anyone. She did not know what to say, so she said nothing. She just looked at him, and he looked at her, and the silence stretched between them like a bridge over a great divide. On the seventh day, Samuel reached for Clara's hand as he was leaving. He had said goodbye, had turned toward the door, had taken 2 steps across the room, and then he had stopped. When he turned back, there was something vulnerable in his eyes, something uncertain. "Clara," he said. It was the first time he had used her first name. "Yes." He crossed back to her in 2 quick strides. He took her hand in both of his, holding it like something precious. "I am not very good at this," he said, "at opening up, at letting people in. After Eleanor died, I closed myself off from the world. It was easier that way. Safer. I understand. But these past days with you," he continued, his grip tightening slightly on her hand, "I have felt something I thought I would never feel again. Something like hope." Clara's heart was pounding. "Samuel." "I am not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I know your situation is complicated. I know you are still married, that Robert is still out there somewhere. I am not trying to take advantage of your circumstances. I know you are not. I just need you to know." Samuel's thumb traced a slow circle on the back of her hand, sending shivers up her arm. "I am not doing this out of charity anymore. I am not doing it because I want to feel useful, or because I see myself in you, or any of those other reasons I told myself at the beginning." "Then why are you doing it?" Samuel met her eyes. "Because I care about you, Clara Dawson. Because somewhere in the past week you stopped being someone I wanted to help and started being someone I simply wanted to be near." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. She had thought she was past crying, that the tears had all been used up in the desperate weeks before Samuel appeared. But here they were, spilling down her cheeks again. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I do not know when it happened or how, but I do." Samuel raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Then we will figure this out," he said. "Together." He left then, and Clara stood in the middle of the room with her hand pressed to her chest, feeling the warmth of his kiss still tingling on her skin. For the first time since Robert walked out the door, she felt like she might have a future after all. But happiness has a way of drawing shadows. Clara learned this truth 3 days later when she walked past Mrs. Patterson in the hallway, and the older woman turned her face away. It was a small gesture, a slight that could have been accidental, A trick of the dim lighting, a moment of distraction. But Clara knew better. She had seen the way Mrs. Patterson's eyes had darted to her face before looking away. She had seen the tightening of the woman's mouth, the stiffening of her shoulders. And Patterson had seen her with Samuel, and she had judged. The whispers started that same day. Clara heard them in the hallway when she went to fetch water. She heard them on the stairs when she came back from the pharmacy. She heard them through the thin walls of her room, carried on voices that thought they were too quiet to be overheard. She has a husband somewhere, they said, and she is carrying on with another man. Rich man like that coming to a place like this. There is only one reason. Poor child having a mother like that. Clara tried to ignore them. She tried to tell herself that the opinions of her neighbors did not matter, that their gossip could not hurt her, that she had done nothing wrong. But the words wormed their way under her skin anyway. She was still a married woman. Robert might have abandoned her, might have disappeared without a trace, but in the eyes of God and the law, she was Mrs. Robert Dawson. And a married woman who entertained a gentleman caller, even one as respectful as Samuel, was breaking rules that respectable society did not forgive. Clara told herself it did not matter. She told herself that the people whispering about her had never faced the choice she had faced, had never watched their child dying while the world walked past, had never posted a desperate note on a message board and prayed that anyone would stop. But their judgment settled on her shoulders like a second weight, and she could not shake it off. Then Mrs. Cordelia Ashworth appeared. It was a gray afternoon with snow threatening to fall from a sky the color of dirty wool. Clara was standing at the window watching for Samuel when an elegant carriage pulled up in front of the building. It was the kind of carriage that did not belong on this street. Black lacquered wood, gleaming brass fixtures, a matched pair of bay horses with coats that shone like silk. The driver wore livery finer than anything Clara had ever owned. The door opened and a woman emerged. She was in her late 40s, handsome rather than beautiful, with sharp features and calculating eyes. Her dress was purple silk, perfectly tailored, and her hat was adorned with a single peacock feather that bobbed as she walked. Everything about her screamed money and power and the absolute certainty that the world would arrange itself according to her wishes. She looked up at the building with an expression of undisguised disgust. Then her gaze swept across the windows until it found Clara. Their eyes met. Clara felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The woman smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. At that moment, Samuel appeared around the corner. He was walking quickly, carrying his usual basket, his head bent against the wind. He did not see the carriage until he was almost upon it. He stopped dead. Samuel, the woman called out. Her voice was clear and carrying pitch to be heard by everyone within 100 feet. I heard rumors that you were spending time in this neighborhood. I assumed they were lies. Samuel's expression went carefully blank. Cordelia, what are you doing here? Looking for you, of course. The woman Cordelia moved toward him with the grace of a predator. We have not seen you at any social functions in weeks. The Merriweathers asked about you at their dinner party. The Van Burens mentioned you have not been to the club. People are talking, Samuel. Let them talk. Cordelia's eyes narrowed. She stepped closer to Samuel, lowering her voice. But Clara could still hear every word through the thin glass of her window. They say you have found a woman. A poor woman with a child. A married woman, Samuel. She practically spat the last two words. Is it true my affairs are none of your concern, Cordelia? I am making them my concern. Cordelia reached out and laid a hand on Samuel's arm, a gesture that was both possessive and threatening. Eleanor was my dearest friend. She would be devastated to see you throwing yourself away on some common fortune hunter. Something dangerous flickered in Samuel's eyes. Do not speak of Eleanor. Why not? Cordelia's voice rose, her pretense of discretion abandoned. She trusted me to look after you if anything happened to her. She made me promise. And now I find you here in this slum visiting a woman who sells herself for companionship. Clara felt the words like a physical blow. She stepped back from the window, her face burning with shame. She sells nothing, Samuel said, his voice cold and hard as ice. She is a mother who was desperate to save her dying child. I helped her because it was the right thing to do, because someone should have stopped for her when no one else would. How noble of you. Cordelia's laugh was sharp and mocking. And I suppose she has done nothing to encourage your attention? Nothing to make you believe that she might be interested in something more than your charity. That is enough, is it? Cordelia leaned closer. Chicago society does not forgive scandal, Samuel. The business contacts, the social connections, everything you have built could crumble if you continue down this path. Think about what you are risking for this woman. I am risking nothing that matters. And what about her? Cordelia's voice dropped to a hiss. Have you thought about what you are risking for her, a woman like that, with her reputation, with her circumstances? If it becomes known that she is accepting favors from a wealthy man, do you think anyone will believe your protestations of innocence? Do you think the world will care that your relationship is chaste? Samuel was silent. She will be ruined. Cordelia continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Utterly and completely ruined. Is that what you want for her? Is that how you help her? Clara pressed her hand against the cold glass of the window. Her heart was pounding, her breath coming fast. She had not thought about this, had not considered that Samuel's attention might bring her more harm than good. Think about what I have said. Cordelia stepped back, her message delivered. For her sake, if not for your own. She returned to her carriage without waiting for a response. The driver helped her in, the door closed, and the elegant equipage rolled away down the muddy street. Samuel stood alone in the snow, his head bowed, his shoulders rigid. Then he looked up at Clara's window. Their eyes met through the glass. Clara saw the anger in his expression, the frustration, the pain. But she also saw something else. Determination. Samuel walked into the building. 2 minutes later, he was at her door. You heard, he said. It was not a question. Clara nodded. She did not trust her voice. Samuel set down his basket and took both her hands in his. Cordelia Ashworth is a bitter, lonely woman who has never recovered from her husband's death. She imagines herself in love with me because Eleanor was her friend, and she thinks inheriting Eleanor's husband would be the next best thing to having Eleanor herself. I did not know. You do not need to know. Samuel's grip tightened. She is nothing. Her threats are nothing. The opinions of society, the whispers, the judgment, all of it is nothing compared to what matters. And what matters, Samuel looked into her eyes. You, Lily, the chance to build something real with someone who sees me for who I am, not what I have. Clara felt tears threatening again. But Samuel, she is right about one thing. My reputation. If people believe that I am your mistress, that I traded my virtue for your help, let them believe what they want. I cannot. Clara pulled her hands free. I have to think about Lily, about her future. If she grows up with a mother known as a fallen woman, what chance will she have? Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised her. Then we will give them nothing to talk about. We will conduct ourselves with perfect propriety. I will not visit alone anymore. I will bring a chaperone. We will meet in public places in full view of anyone who cares to watch. And when the time is right, when your situation is resolved, we will show them all what we really are. And what are we, Samuel smiled. That is what we were going to find out. But Clara knew even then that it would not be so simple. Mrs. Ashworth had planted a seed, and seeds once planted have a way of growing into things no one can control. 3 weeks later, Clara learned just how far those seeds had spread. It began with a knock at her door, but not the familiar knock of Samuel at 3 o'clock. This knock was harsh and aggressive, the knock of someone who had come to deliver bad news. Clara opened the door to find Mrs. Vogel standing there, her face red with anger, a piece of paper clutched in her hand. Mrs. Dawson, the landlady said, we need to talk. She pushed past Clara into the room without waiting for an invitation. Her eyes swept over the improvements, the food on the table, the coal burning in the stove, the healthy baby sleeping in a proper cradle that Samuel had brought just last week. So it is true, Mrs. Vogel said. You have found a wealthy protector. Mr. Hartwell is not my protector. Then what is he? He is my friend. Clara kept her voice steady, though her heart was racing. He helped me when I had nowhere else to turn. He saved my daughter's life. And in exchange for nothing. Clara lifted her chin. He is a good man who saw someone in need and chose to help. That is all. Mrs. Vogel laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. That is not what this says. She held up the piece of paper. I received this letter this morning. It claims that you are living in sin with a married man, that you are bringing moral corruption into my building, that if I do not evict you immediately, I will face consequences. Clara felt her blood run cold. Let me see that. She took the paper from Mrs. Vogel's hand. The handwriting was elegant and feminine. The message was poison distilled into words. The letter accused Clara of being a prostitute. It accused Samuel of being an adulterer. It described their relationship in terms so lurid and false that Clara could barely believe what she was reading. And at the bottom, though, unsigned, the closing sentiment was clear. A concerned citizen who believes in the sanctity of marriage and the protection of Christian values. This is lies, Clara said. All of it. Mr. Hartwell is a widower. He has not touched me improperly. We have done nothing wrong. But Mrs. Vogel was shaking her head. It does not matter what is true, Mrs. Dawson. It matters what people believe. And right now, people believe you are a fallen woman living under my roof. Then tell them they are wrong. I have a business to run. Mrs. Vogel's voice was tired now, all the anger drained out of it. I have other tenants who threaten to leave if you stay. I have a reputation in this neighborhood. If I am known as someone who houses women of loose morals, I will lose everything I have built. Clara felt the walls closing in. Mrs. Vogel, please. Where will I go? Lily has just recovered. If I take her out in this cold, you should have thought of that before you invited scandal into your life. I did not invite anything. I was trying to survive. Mrs. Vogel looked at her for a long moment. Something flickered in her expression. Something that might have been sympathy in another life. You have until morning, she said finally. Pack your things. Find somewhere else to go. I am sorry, Mrs. Dawson. Truly I am, but I cannot help you anymore. She left without another word. Clara stood in the middle of the room, the poisonous letter still clutched in her hand. Outside, the sky was darkening, heavy clouds rolling in off the lake. Another storm was coming, and she had nowhere to go. When Samuel arrived at 3 o'clock, Clara was sitting on the bed with Lily in her arms and tears streaming down her face. He took one look at her and knew. What happened? Clara handed him the letter. She watched his expression darken as he read, watched his hands tighten on the paper until his knuckles went white. Cordelia, he said. It had to be Cordelia. Does it matter who wrote it? The result is the same. I have been evicted. By tomorrow morning, Lily and I will be on the street. Samuel crushed the letter in his fist. No, you will not. What choice do I have? Samuel knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. Come with me, he said. You and Lily. Come stay at my house. Clara shook her head. Samuel, we talked about this. If I move into your home, the whispers will become shouts. Your reputation, my reputation, everything will be destroyed. I do not care about my reputation. But I care about mine. Clara's voice broke. I care about what kind of mother people think I am. I care about what Lily will hear when she is old enough to understand. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was firm with conviction. Clara, listen to me. I have spent 2 years living in a house that feels like a tomb. Every room reminds me of Eleanor. Every silence reminds me that I am alone. I wake up every morning and wonder why I bother getting out of bed at all. Samuel, but these past weeks with you, something has changed. You and Lily have given me a reason to care again, a reason to hope. You have brought light into a darkness that I thought would swallow me whole. He lifted her hand and pressed it against his chest over his heart. This house I live in has room for 10 families, he said. There are servants who will serve as chaperones. There are locked doors and separate wings and every propriety that society could demand. And even if there were not, even if the whole world stood in judgment of us, I would still ask you to come. Why? Because I cannot watch you walk out into the cold again. Samuel's voice cracked. I cannot stand by while you and Lily suffer when I have the power to help. I will not be the man who does not stop. Not again. Not ever again. Clara looked into his eyes. She saw the pain there and the hope and something else. Something that looked like the beginning of love. If I come with you, she said slowly, people will assume the worst. Let them. My reputation will never recover. Reputation does not keep you warm at night. Samuel squeezed her hands. Safety does. Security does. A roof over your head and food on your table and people who care about you. Those things matter. The rest is just noise. Clara looked down at Lily sleeping peacefully in her arms. Her daughter was healthy now, pink-cheeked and growing stronger every day. That was because of Samuel, because he had stopped when no one else would. Could she really turn away from him now? Could she really choose pride over survival? reputation over shelter, the judgment of strangers over the kindness of the one person who had proven himself trustworthy. "All right," she whispered, "we will come with you." Samuel's face transformed. Relief and joy and something like wonder flooded his features. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for trusting me." Clara smiled through her tears. "You have given me no reason not to." They packed her meager belongings that afternoon. Samuel insisted on carrying the heaviest bags himself, though Clara knew he had servants who could have done it for him. When they walked down the stairs together, neighbors watched from their doorways. Their eyes were cold. Their silence spoke louder than any words. Clara held her head high and did not look back. The carriage was waiting at the curb. It was not as grand as Mrs. Ashworth's, but it was warm and comfortable with plush seats and heavy curtains to block the wind. Samuel helped Clara in, then took Lily from her arms and placed the sleeping baby gently on the seat beside her. "Are you ready?" he asked. Clara looked out the window at the building that had been her home for nearly a year. The tiny room where she had given birth to Lily. The window where she had stood and watched the world go by praying for someone to help. Samuel Hartwell had answered that prayer. He had walked into her life and changed everything. And now she was walking into his. "Yes," she said. "I am ready." The carriage began to move, carrying Clara and Lily away from the only home they had known. Behind them, the whispers and judgments faded into the snow. But as the horses pulled them toward Prairie Avenue and the new life waiting for them there, Clara could not shake the feeling that the past was not finished with her yet. Somewhere out there in the gold fields of California or on the roads leading back to Chicago, a man named Robert Dawson was still her husband. And husbands, even absent ones, have a way of returning when they are least expected. Samuel Hartwell had given Clara hope. He had given her shelter and food and the promise of a future. But the question that hung in the cold winter air, the question that neither of them dared to speak aloud, was this. What would happen when Robert came back to claim what he believed was his? Clara did not know. But she had a feeling she was about to find out. The house on Prairie Avenue was unlike anything Clara had ever seen. It rose 3 stories high, built of pale Indiana limestone that seemed to glow in the weak winter sunlight. Tall windows lined each floor, their glass panes catching the light and throwing it back like diamonds. A wrought iron fence surrounded the property, its gates adorned with scrollwork so delicate it looked like frozen lace. Clara stood on the sidewalk, Lily in her arms, and stared. "This is your home," she said. It was not a question. Samuel stood beside her, watching her poised with something like anxiety. "Yes, I know it is large, too large for one person. Eleanor always said we should fill it with children, but we never—" He stopped. His jaw tightened. "We never could." Clara heard the pain beneath his words and reached out to touch his arm. "It is beautiful," she said. "Thank you for sharing it with us." The front door opened before they reached it. A woman appeared on the threshold, red-haired and sharp-eyed, with the bearing of someone who ran a tight ship and expected everyone else to fall in line. "Mr. Hartwell," the woman said. Her voice carried a thick Irish accent. "I received your message. The rooms are prepared. Thank you, Maggie." Samuel guided Clara up the front steps. "Mrs. Dawson, this is Margaret O'Brien. She has been managing my household for 8 years. Maggie, this is Mrs. Clara Dawson and her daughter Lily. They will be staying with us for a while." Maggie's eyes swept over Clara with the practiced assessment of a woman who had seen too much of the world to be fooled by appearances. Her gaze lingered on Clara's worn dress, her thin shoes the baby clutched protectively in her arms. "So this is the one," Maggie said. Her tone was neutral, giving nothing away. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks, but refused to look away. "Yes, I am the one. And I know what you are thinking, do you now? You are thinking that I am a fortune hunter, that I have attached myself to Mr. Hartwell for his money, that I am no better than the women who loiter outside the taverns on State Street." Maggie's eyebrows rose. "That is quite an assumption." "Am I wrong?" For a long moment, Maggie said nothing. She studied Clara with those sharp eyes, taking her measure, weighing her worth. Then unexpectedly she smiled. "No," she said. "You are not wrong. That is exactly what I was thinking." She stepped aside to let them enter. "But I am beginning to think I might have been mistaken." The interior of the house was even more impressive than the exterior. A grand foyer opened onto a sweeping staircase. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their facets catching the light from tall windows. Persian rugs covered the hardwood floors, and paintings in gilded frames lined the walls. But despite its grandeur, the house felt cold, empty, like a museum rather than a home. Eleanor decorated most of it, Samuel said, as if reading Clara's thoughts. I have not changed anything since she died. Clara looked around at the elegant furnishings, the careful arrangements, the tasteful color schemes. She could see the hand of a woman in every detail, a woman who had loved this house and the man who lived in it. She had good taste, Clara said softly. She had good everything. Samuel's voice was thick with emotion. That was the problem. She was too good for this world. Maggie cleared her throat. Shall I show Mrs. Dawson to her room, sir? Yes. Thank you, Maggie. Samuel turned to Clara. You will be in the East Wing. There is a nursery attached that should be suitable for Lily. If you need anything at all, you have only to ask. Clara nodded. She did not trust her voice. Maggie led her up the grand staircase and down a long hallway. Their footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors, unnaturally loud in the silence of the house. He has not been himself since Mrs. Hartwell died, Maggie said suddenly. She did not turn around, did not slow her pace. 2 years and he has been like a ghost walking through these halls. I was beginning to think he would never come back to life. Clara did not know what to say. But these past weeks, Maggie continued, something has changed. He smiles now. He talks about the future instead of the past. She stopped at a door and turned to face Clara. I do not know what you are to him, Mrs. Dawson. I do not know what you have done or what you intend to do. But I know this, you have given him something no one else could. What is that hope? Maggie opened the door. Your rooms, ma'am. The suite was larger than Clara's entire apartment had been. A sitting room with comfortable furniture and a fireplace already blazing. A bedroom with a 4-poster bed draped in blue velvet. A small nursery with a proper crib and a rocking chair by the window. Clara stepped inside, Lily still in her arms, and felt tears prick at her eyes. This is too much, she whispered. It is what Mr. Hartwell wants for you. Maggie's voice had softened. He is a good man, Mrs. Dawson. Whatever the world says about him, whatever that Ashworth woman tries to do, he is a good man. Do not let anyone make you doubt that. I will not. Maggie nodded. Dinner is at 7. I will send someone to help you dress. She left, closing the door quietly behind her. Clara stood in the middle of the beautiful room, holding her daughter, and tried to understand how her life had changed so completely in such a short time. 3 weeks ago, she had been preparing to sell herself to save Lily's life. Now she was standing in a mansion on Prairie Avenue, surrounded by luxuries she had never imagined, being cared for by a man who asked nothing in return except the chance to help. It did not seem real. None of it seemed real. But Lily was warm in her arms, and the fire was crackling in the grate, and somewhere downstairs Samuel Hartwell was waiting for her. That was real enough. The confrontation came 5 days after Clara moved into Samuel's house. She was in the parlor reading to Lily when Maggie appeared with a grim expression. There are people at the door, sir. Sir, Maggie said to Samuel. A delegation, they call themselves. Samuel rose from his chair. Clara followed him to the entrance hall. Standing on the front steps was Reverend Josiah Crawford, his white hair gleaming in the winter light, his face set in righteous indignation. Behind him stood Mrs. Ashworth in her purple silk and a cluster of well-dressed men and women who looked at Clara as if she were something scraped off the bottom of a shoe. Mr. Hartwell Crawford began, his voice booming like a Sunday sermon. We have come out of concern for your immortal soul. You are harboring a married woman under your roof. This is adultery in the eyes of God. I have given shelter to a mother with a sick child, Samuel replied calmly. In the dead of winter. If that is a sin, then I will answer for it gladly. Crawford's eyes found Clara standing behind Samuel. Mrs. Dawson, he said, dripping false sympathy. Your situation is unfortunate, but surely you must see that your presence here brings scandal upon this good man. Perhaps it would be better for everyone if you returned to your husband. Clara felt something snap inside her, all the fear, all the shame, all the weeks of judgment and whispers, it all crystallized into cold, clear anger. She stepped forward, Lily in her arms, her back straight. Reverend Crawford, she said, her voice steady. When my daughter was dying, I came to your church. I knelt in your pews and begged for help. Do you remember what you gave me? Crawford's face reddened. I gave you bread. I gave you prayers. You gave me 1 loaf of bread and words. Clara's voice rose. Not enough to buy medicine. Not enough to pay rent. Not enough to keep my child alive. She looked at the assembled faces at the judgment in their eyes. But Mr. Hartwell could help. He did help. He saved my daughter's life while all of you looked the other way. She turned back to Crawford. You did not come here to save anyone's soul, Reverend. You came to judge, because judging is easier than helping. It always has been. Samuel placed a protective hand on Clara's shoulder. I believe this conversation is over, he said. Please leave my property. Mrs. Ashworth's parting words were sharp as knives. You will both regret this, she hissed. I promise you that. They left, but their judgment lingered in the air like smoke. Clara was trembling. Samuel turned her to face him. You were magnificent, he said softly. I was terrified. Courage is not the absence of fear. Samuel brushed a strand of hair from her face. It is speaking the truth even when your voice shakes. The first days in Samuel's house were strange and wonderful. Clara had never lived anywhere with servants. She did not know how to behave, what to say, how to accept the small courtesies that the staff offered without feeling like a fraud. When a maid came to help her dress in the morning, Clara's cheeks burned with embarrassment. When the cook asked what she would like for breakfast, Clara could only stammer that anything would be fine. But gradually she began to adjust. The staff were kind, even if some of them looked at her with curiosity or suspicion. The house was warm and comfortable, and Lily thrived in her new nursery. There was food on the table 3 times a day, more food than Clara had seen in months. There was hot water for baths and soft clothes to wear, and fires in every room. And there was Samuel. He was different here in his own house. More relaxed, more open. He smiled more often. He laughed at small things. He sat with Clara in the evenings and talked about everything about his business and his childhood and the dreams he had once had for the future. He told her about growing up poor, about the father who beat him and the mother who died when he was 10. He told her about leaving home at 14 with nothing but determination and a scar on his face. He told her about working on the docks and in the factories and on the railroad, about saving every penny until he had enough to buy his first wagon and start hauling freight. I built everything from nothing, he said one evening as they sat in the parlor, the fire crackling softly between them. Every dollar I have I earned with my own hands. No one gave me anything. No one stopped to help. But I survived because I refused to give up. Clara understood that refusal better than anyone. And then there was Eleanor, Samuel continued. His voice softened when he spoke her name. She was the daughter of a bookbinder in Boston. No money, no connections. But she was kind and beautiful, and she believed in me when no one else did. I married her because I loved her. And I built all of this because I wanted to give her the life she deserved. You must have made her very happy. I tried. Samuel stared into the fire. For 14 years I tried, and then she got sick, and none of it mattered anymore. All the money, all the success, it could not save her. I would have given everything I had for one more day with her. One more hour. Clara reached out and took his hand. I am sorry. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. After she died, I thought I would never feel anything again, he said. I thought that part of me had died with her. But then I met you, Samuel. I am not asking for anything. He squeezed her hand. I know your situation is complicated. I know there are obstacles between us that may never be resolved. But I want you to know that these past weeks have meant more to me than you can imagine. You have given me a reason to hope again. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. You have given me the same thing. They sat in silence for a long moment, hands intertwined, the fire crackling softly. Outside, the snow fell thick and silent, covering the city in white. It was the closest to peace Clara had felt in a very long time. But peace, like happiness, has a way of attracting shadows. The letter arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. Samuel was at his office when the messenger came. Clara was in the nursery playing with Lily when Maggie appeared in the doorway with an envelope in her hand and a worried expression on her face. This came for you, Maggie said. She held out the envelope, delivered by a boy who would not give his name. Clara took the envelope with trembling fingers. Her name was written on the front in an elegant, feminine hand, the same hand that had written the anonymous letter that got her evicted. She knew who it was from before she even opened it. The letter was short and brutal. Dear Mrs. Dawson, I hope you are enjoying your new accommodations. I understand the East Wing is quite comfortable, though I confess I always preferred the view from the West. Eleanor and I spent many pleasant afternoons in the conservatory there. I wonder if Samuel has shown it to you yet. I want you to understand something. Samuel Hartwell belongs to this community. He belongs to the society that Eleanor and I built together. He does not belong to a common fortune hunter who saw an opportunity and seized it. You may have wormed your way into his house. You may even have wormed your way into his heart, but you will never be accepted. You will never be one of us. And eventually Samuel will realize his mistake. I am a patient woman, Mrs. Dawson. I can wait. But I want you to know that I am watching. And when the time is right, when your true nature is revealed, I will be there to pick up the pieces. Enjoy your borrowed luxury while it lasts. With warmest regards, says Cordelia Ashworth. Clara read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in her pocket. Bad news, Maggie asked. Nothing unexpected. Clara forced a smile. Just someone who wants me to know my place. Maggie's expression darkened. That Ashworth woman. Yes, she has been circling this house like a vulture since Mrs. Hartwell died. Maggie's voice was sharp with contempt. Showed up the day after the funeral with a casserole and her condolences. Started coming around more and more often, dropping hints about how lonely Mr. Hartwell must be, how Eleanor would have wanted him to move on. She was Eleanor's friend. She thought she was. Maggie snorted. Mrs. Hartwell tolerated her because they moved in the same circles, but she never liked her. Told me once that Cordelia Ashworth had a heart like a cash register, always calculating what she could get from every relationship. Clara looked down at the letter in her pocket, and now she has decided that I am standing between her and what she wants. It seems that way. What should I do? Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that surprised Clara. Do you love him? Clara felt her cheeks flush. That is a complicated question. No, it is not. Maggie's eyes were sharp and knowing. Either you love him or you do not. Everything else is just details. Clara thought about the past weeks, about Samuel's kindness and patience, about the way he looked at her like she was something precious, about the warmth she felt when he walked into a room, the emptiness when he left. Yes, she said quietly, I think I do, then fight for him. Maggie's voice was fierce. Do not let that woman, do not let anyone take him away from you. If you love him, fight for him with everything you have. But I am still married. Robert is still out there somewhere. Even if I wanted to be with Samuel, I cannot. That is a problem for tomorrow. Maggie reached out and gripped Clara's hand. Today you are here. Today you have a chance at happiness. Do not throw it away because you are afraid of what might happen. Clara looked at the older woman and saw her own determination reflected back at her. I will not, she said. I will fight. That evening, Clara made a decision. She waited until after dinner, until Lily was asleep in her nursery, and the servants had retired for the night. Then she went to find Samuel. He was in his study, the room he had shown her only once before. It was a masculine space lined with bookshelves and leather furniture. A large desk dominated one corner, covered with papers and ledgers from his business. And on the mantelpiece, in a place of honor, sat a small wooden box. Clara had asked about that box once early in their acquaintance. Samuel had changed the subject so quickly that she knew it held something important, something painful. She had not asked again. But tonight she needed to know. Samuel looked up as she entered. His face brightened, then grew concerned as he saw her expression. Clara, what is wrong? Nothing is wrong. She closed the door behind her and crossed the room to stand beside him. I just wanted to talk to you about us. Samuel's brow furrowed. What about us? Clara took a deep breath. She had rehearsed this speech a dozen times in her head, but now that the moment had come, the words seemed to scatter. I received another letter from Mrs. Ashworth today. Samuel's expression darkened. What did she say? It does not matter. Clara waved her hand dismissively. What matters is what it made me realize. And what is that? Clara looked into his eyes. That I have been hiding. From the world, from the gossip, from the truth of what I feel. I have been telling myself that I cannot love you because I am still married. That I cannot hope for a future with you because Robert might come back. That I have to protect myself from disappointment by never admitting what I want. Samuel was very still. And what do you want? Clara reached out and took his hand. I want you, she said simply. I want this life you have offered me. I want to wake up every morning knowing that you are here, that Lily is safe, that I am not alone anymore. Clara, I know it is complicated. I know there are obstacles. But Maggie asked me today if I love you, and I realize that I do. I love you, Samuel Hartwell, and I am tired of pretending otherwise. For a long moment, Samuel did not speak. He stood there holding her hand, his eyes searching her face as if looking for some sign that she was not serious. Then he pulled her into his arms. The embrace was not passionate. It was not the kind of embrace that leads to bedrooms and scandal. It was simply two people holding each other, two people who had been alone for too long, finally admitting that they did not want to be alone anymore. I love you too, Samuel whispered into her hair. I have loved you since the night I saw you standing at that window, looking out at the snow like you were searching for something you had lost. Clara buried her face in his chest. I was searching for hope. And did you find it? I found you. That was better. They stood there for a long time wrapped in each other's arms, not speaking. The fire crackled softly. The snow fell outside the window. And for one perfect moment, everything was right with the world. Then Samuel pulled back and looked at her. There is something I want to show you, he said, something I have never shown anyone. He walked to the mantelpiece and took down the small wooden box. His hands trembled slightly as he carried it back to his desk and set it down. This is everything I have left of her, Samuel said. His voice was rough with emotion. Eleanor, after she died, I could not bear to look at these things. So I locked them away where I would not have to see them. You do not have to show me. Yes, I do. Samuel lifted the lid. If we are going to build a future together, you need to understand my past. Inside the box were 3 items: a stack of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, a small daguerreotype in a silver frame, and a length of ribbon the same pale blue color, soft and worn. Samuel picked up the photograph and handed it to Clara. The woman in the picture was beautiful. Dark hair, kind eyes, a gentle smile. She looked like the sort of person who made everyone around her feel at ease. Eleanor, Clara said. On our wedding day, Samuel's voice was barely a whisper. She was 22 years old. The same age you are now. She was lovely. She was everything. Samuel took the photograph back and looked at it for a long moment. For 14 years, she was my whole world. And then one winter, she got a cold that would not go away. The cold became a cough. The cough became pneumonia. And in 3 weeks, she was gone. Clara felt tears prickling at her eyes. I am so sorry. Samuel set the photograph down and picked up the blue ribbon. This was hers, he said. She wore it in her hair every day. After she died, I found it on her dresser, and I could not throw it away. It still smells like her. He held the ribbon out to Clara. She took it gently, feeling the soft fabric between her fingers. She had beautiful hair. Samuel continued, dark and long, down to her waist. She used to let me brush it sometimes in the evenings before bed. He shook his head. I have not told anyone that. I have not talked about her to anyone since she died. Why are you telling me now? Because you need to know who I was before you decide who I might become. Samuel looked at her, his eyes raw with vulnerability. I loved Eleanor with everything I had. When she died, I thought that part of me was gone forever. I thought I would spend the rest of my life in this house, surrounded by her memory, waiting for death to reunite us. And then you met me. And then I met you. Samuel took her hands in his. Clara, I do not want to replace Eleanor. No one could ever replace her. But I have learned something these past weeks, something I never expected. What is that the heart has room for more than one love? He lifted her hands to his lips and kissed them gently. I will always love Eleanor. She will always be part of me. But that does not mean I cannot also love you. It does not mean I cannot build a new life while still honoring the old one. Clara felt something break open inside her. All the fear and doubt and uncertainty that had been holding her back seemed to dissolve in the warmth of his words. I understand, she said. Robert was not a good husband, but I loved him once. I cannot pretend that part of my life never happened. But I can choose to move forward. I can choose to hope for something better. Then let us hope together. Samuel pulled her close again. Whatever comes, whatever obstacles we face, we will face them together. They stood there in the firelight, two broken people finding something whole in each other. And when Clara finally left his study that night, she carried with her a new certainty. She had found something worth fighting for, and she would not let anyone take it away. But even as Clara climbed the stairs to her room, even as she checked on Lily and prepared for bed, a clock was ticking that she could not hear. In a law office on LaSalle Street, a man named Theodore Brennan was reviewing a case file that would soon change everything. And in a hotel on the south side of the city, another man was checking into a room under a false name. A man with golden hair and blue-green eyes in a bag full of gold coins. Robert Dawson had returned to Chicago, and he wanted his wife back. The morning after Clara's confession to Samuel, she woke to find a gift on her dresser. It was a small velvet box, the kind that jewelers use for precious items. Beside it lay a note in Samuel's handwriting. This belonged to Eleanor. She would have wanted you to have it. Clara opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside lay a simple gold locket on a delicate chain. She opened it and found two tiny portraits, one of Samuel as a young man and one of a dark-haired woman with kind eyes. Eleanor. Clara stared at the locket for a long time. She understood what this gift meant. Samuel was not trying to replace his dead wife with a living woman. He was trying to honor them both, to weave his past and future together into something new. She fastened the locket around her neck and went downstairs to thank him. But when she reached the dining room, she found Samuel in conversation with a stranger. A middle-aged man in a well-cut suit carrying a leather briefcase with the careful expression of someone who delivered bad news for a living. "Ah, Clara." Samuel rose from his chair. "This is Mr. Theodore Brennan. He is my lawyer." Clara felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest. Is something wrong? Brennan studied her with sharp eyes. "Mrs. Dawson, it is a pleasure to meet you. I have heard a great deal about you." The words were polite, but there was an edge beneath them. Clara suddenly felt very aware of her position in this house, her uncertain status, the clouds of gossip that surrounded her. "Please sit down," Samuel said. "There are some things we need to discuss." Clara sat. Her hands were cold, and she clasped them together in her lap to hide the trembling. Brennan opened his briefcase and withdrew a sheaf of papers. "Mr. Hartwell has asked me to look into your legal situation," he said, "specifically the matter of your marriage and your rights regarding your daughter." Clara's heart began to pound. "And what have you found?" Brennan's expression was grave. "Mrs. Dawson, I must be direct with you. Under Illinois law, a married woman has very few rights independent of her husband. Your property, your earnings, even your children technically belong to your husband. If Robert Dawson were to return and assert his rights, there is very little you could do to stop him. But he abandoned us." Clara's voice shook. "He left us with nothing. He has not sent a single penny or written a single letter in 6 months." "I understand, but abandonment while grounds for divorce does not automatically terminate a husband's rights. Unless and until a court declares your marriage dissolved, Robert Dawson remains your legal husband. And as your husband, he has certain claims. Claims to what?" Brennan hesitated. "To you, to your daughter, to your person and your property." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. He could take Lily legally, yes. A father's rights to his children are nearly absolute under current law. If Robert Dawson returned and demanded custody of Lily, the courts would almost certainly side with him. Samuel leaned forward. "There must be something we can do. There are options." Brennan shuffled through his papers. "We can file for divorce on grounds of abandonment and failure to provide. We can petition the court to strip Mr. Dawson of his parental rights. But these processes take time, sometimes years. And in the meantime, you would remain vulnerable." Clara's mind was racing. "So what do you suggest?" Brennan glanced at Samuel before answering. "The simplest solution would be marriage. If Mrs. Dawson were to remarry, her new husband would become Lily's legal stepfather. His rights would supersede those of the absent biological father, especially if the biological father had abandoned his responsibilities." "But I cannot remarry." Clara's voice was barely a whisper. "I am still married to Robert, which is why we need to find him." Brennan's expression was grim. "We need to locate Robert Dawson and either convince him to grant you a divorce or gather enough evidence of abandonment to have the marriage annulled. Until then, you exist in a legal limbo that leaves you and Lily exposed." Clara felt as if the walls were closing in. She had known that her situation was complicated, but hearing it laid out in such stark legal terms made it terrifyingly real. Samuel reached across the table and took her hand. "We will figure this out," he said. "Whatever it takes, whatever it costs, we will protect you and Lily. I promise you that." Clara looked into his eyes and saw nothing but determination and love. She wanted to believe him. But even as she nodded, even as she squeezed his hand in gratitude, a cold fear was settling into her bones. Robert was out there somewhere. And if he came back, if he found her living in another man's house, what would he do? She did not know, but she had a feeling she was about to find out. The storm hit 3 days later. Clara was in the parlor with Samuel discussing the lawyer's recommendations when Maggie burst through the door. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with alarm. "Mr. Hartwell," she gasped. "There is a man at the door. He says he is Mrs. Dawson's husband." The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She staggered, and only Samuel's quick reflexes kept her from falling. "Robert," she whispered. "He found me." Samuel's expression hardened into something fierce and protective. "Stay here," he said. "I will deal with this." "No." Clara gripped his arm. "I have to see him. I have to know what he wants." Samuel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Together, then." They walked to the front hall, side by side, Clara's hand trembling in Samuel's. The grand foyer seemed smaller somehow. The chandeliers dimmer, the air heavy with anticipation. And there, standing just inside the doorway, was Robert Dawson. 6 months had changed him. His golden hair was longer now, streaked with early gray at the temples. His face was weathered, tanned by the California sun, roughened by months of hard labor. He had lost weight, his cheekbones standing out sharply beneath his skin. And his eyes, those blue-green eyes that had once sparkled with charm and dreams, were hard now. Cold. He was wearing a suit that looked new and expensive, though dust still clung to his boots from the road. A leather satchel hung from his shoulder, bulging with something heavy. His gaze swept over the grand entryway, the crystal chandeliers, the Persian rugs, the marble floors. Then it landed on Clara, and something twisted in his expression. "So it is true," he said. His voice was the same as she remembered, smooth and charming, but with a new edge beneath it. "My wife has found herself a wealthy protector." "Robert." Clara was amazed at how steady her voice sounded, given that her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "What are you doing here? What am I doing here?" Robert laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I am coming home to my wife. Is that not what husbands do?" Samuel stepped forward. "Mr. Dawson, I am Samuel Hartwell. This is my home." Robert's eyes narrowed. "I know who you are. The whole city is talking about you. The rich widower who took in a poor married woman and her child." He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Very charitable of you. Your wife was in desperate circumstances. I offered her assistance. I am sure you did." Robert's gaze slid to Clara, then back to Samuel. "And what kind of assistance exactly have you been offering?" Clara stepped forward before Samuel could respond. "He saved our daughter's life," she said. Her voice shook with anger now. "Lily was dying, Robert. She had pneumonia. I had no money for medicine, no money for food, no money for rent. While you were in California digging for gold, our baby was fighting for her life." Something flickered in Robert's expression. He had not known. Clara could see it in his face. He had not known how close Lily had come to death. But the flicker was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that hard, cold mask. "I am sorry to hear that," he said. His tone suggested he was not sorry at all. "But I am here now." I struck gold, Clara. "Look." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a handful of gold coins. They gleamed in the light of the chandelier, bright and beautiful, and utterly meaningless. "We are rich," Robert continued. "We can go anywhere, do anything. I came back for you, Clara. For you and Lily. We can start over, be a family again." Clara stared at the gold in his hand. 6 months ago, that gold would have been a miracle. 6 months ago, it would have saved Lily's life, paid their debts, given them a future. But 6 months ago, Robert had not been there. "You left us." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You left us with nothing. I was working for us. You were not here." Clara felt tears burning in her eyes. "That is what Lily needed. That is what I needed. Someone who was here." Robert's expression darkened. He stuffed the gold back into his satchel and took a step toward Clara. "So that is how it is," he said. "You have been living in this man's house, wearing his clothes, eating his food, and now you do not need me anymore. Is that it? This is not about need." Clara lifted her chin. "This is about choice." Choice, Robert laughed again, harsh and bitter. "You are my wife, Clara. You do not get to choose. The law says you belong to me. The law also says you abandoned her." Samuel's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Robert and Clara. 6 months without a letter, without a cent, without any contact at all. That is abandonment, Mr. Dawson. And abandonment is grounds for divorce. Robert's eyes narrowed. You seem very familiar with the law, Mr. Hartwell. I have an excellent lawyer. Samuel's expression was calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. Who has already begun the paperwork. Your marriage to Clara is effectively over. The only question is whether you will make this easy or hard. For a long moment, Robert said nothing. He looked from Samuel to Clara and back again, calculating, assessing. Then he smiled. It was the smile Clara remembered from their courting days, charming and confident and completely false. We will see about that, he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. This is my lawyer. His name is Victor Crane. Perhaps your excellent lawyer has heard of him. Samuel took the card and glanced at it. His expression flickered. Crane, he said. The vulture. Robert's smile widened. I see his reputation precedes him. Crane is very good at what he does, Mr. Hartwell, and what he does is win cases that seem unwinnable. He turned to Clara. You have 3 days, my dear. 3 days to decide. Either you come back to me willingly, or I take you back through the courts. And when I do, I will take Lily too. Clara felt her blood run cold. You cannot. I can. I am her father. I have rights. Robert's eyes were like ice. 3 days, Clara. Think carefully about what you want. He turned and walked out the door without looking back. The silence he left behind was deafening. Clara stood frozen in the middle of the grand foyer, her whole body trembling. Everything she had built, everything she had hoped for was crumbling around her. Samuel's arms came around her strong and warm. We will fight this, he said. We have Brennan. We have the truth. We have each other. But Clara was staring at the door where Robert had disappeared, remembering the look in his eyes, the cold certainty in his voice. He is not going to give up, she whispered. He is going to take everything from me. Samuel pulled back and looked into her eyes. Not if I have anything to say about it, he said. You and Lily are under my protection now, and I will not let anyone take you away. Clara wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that love and money and a good lawyer could triumph over the law, and Robert's determination and Victor Crane's ruthless reputation. But as she stood there in the beautiful foyer of the beautiful house, surrounded by everything she had ever wanted, she could not shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Robert had returned, and he was not going to leave without a fight. Victor Crane sat in his office on Dearborn Street, his feet propped on the mahogany desk, a thin cigar sending ribbons of smoke toward the ceiling. The room was dark despite the afternoon hour, the heavy curtains drawn against the winter light. Shadows gathered in the corners like obedient servants. He was reading a file. The name on the cover was Dawson versus Hartwell. Robert Dawson sat across from him, perched on the edge of his chair, like a man who could not decide whether to stay or run. The gold he had brought from California was piled on the desk between them, a glittering testament to months of back-breaking labor. So Crane said, without looking up, "You want your wife back, and my daughter." Robert's voice was tight. "They belong to me." Crane turned a page, his expression unchanging. "According to these records, you abandoned them 6 months ago. No letters, no money. Your wife nearly starved, your daughter nearly died. I was working, you were running." Crane finally looked up and his eyes were black as coal. "Let us not insult each other's intelligence, Mr. Dawson. You had debts, you had creditors. You had a wife and child you were not prepared to support. So you left." Robert's jaw tightened, but he did not deny it. Crane smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "What do you really want?" he asked. The truth this time. Robert was silent for a long moment. Then the mask slipped and Clara would not have recognized the man underneath. "I want Hartwell to pay," he said. His voice was low and venomous. "I want him to suffer for taking what was mine. I want money, and I want Clara to know that she cannot just walk away from me." Crane nodded slowly. "Now we can work together." He closed the file and leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. "Here is what we are going to do. We will not file for custody directly. That is too obvious, too easy to fight. Instead, we will sue Samuel Hartwell for alienation of affection." Robert frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means we accuse him of stealing your wife, of seducing her away from her lawful husband. It is an old law, but it is still on the books in Illinois. If we win, Hartwell owes you damages, significant damages. And Clara, if we prove that Hartwell alienated her affections, we prove that she was unfaithful to her marriage. Crane's smile widened. And an unfaithful mother is an unfit mother. Once we establish that you can petition for custody of the child on the grounds that Clara is morally unfit to raise her, Robert's eyes gleamed. You can do that. I have done it before. Crane picked up one of the gold coins and examined it in the lamplight. The courts are run by men, Mr. Dawson, men who understand the importance of a husband's authority, a father's rights. Give me enough evidence, and I will give you everything you want. What kind of evidence? Crane set down the coin. That he said is where you come in. The summons arrived 3 days later. Clara was in the nursery playing with Lily when Maggie appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she held out an envelope sealed with red wax. A man from the court brought this, Maggie said. He said it was urgent. Clara took the envelope and broke the seal. The words inside seemed to swim before her eyes. Dawson versus Hartwell, alienation of affection. Hearing date March 15th, 1879. She read it 3 times before the meaning sank in. Robert was not just demanding she return to him. He was taking Samuel to court. He was accusing the man who had saved her life of destroying her marriage. And if he won, Clara would lose everything. Samuel found her an hour later, still sitting in the nursery, the summons clutched in her hand. Lily had fallen asleep in her crib, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering around her. I saw Crane's name on the filing. Samuel's voice was grim. I have heard of him. They call him the Vulture. He specializes in cases no one else will touch. Can he win? Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down beside her and took her hand. I will not lie to you, he said. Crane is good at what he does. He knows how to twist the truth, how to make innocent things look sinful. And the law is not on our side. A married woman living in another man's house, even innocently, is enough to raise suspicions. But we have done nothing wrong. I know. Samuel squeezed her hand. And we will prove it. Brennan is already working on our defense. We have witnesses. We have the truth. Will that be enough? Samuel met her eyes. It has to be. That night, Clara could not sleep. She lay in her beautiful bed in her beautiful room, staring at the ceiling, to her mind racing through every possible outcome. If Robert won, she would be forced to return to him. If Robert won, she would be declared an unfit mother. If Robert won, she would lose Lily. The thought was unbearable. She rose from the bed and wrapped herself in a shawl. The house was dark and quiet, the servants long since retired. She walked through the silent hallways, her bare feet cold on the hardwood floors, until she found herself standing outside Samuel's study. A light burned under the door. She knocked softly. Come in. Samuel was sitting at his desk, papers spread before him. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed, his hair disheveled. But when he saw Clara, his expression softened. You could not sleep either, he said. No. Clara crossed to his desk and looked at the papers. Legal documents, witness statements, letters and records and evidence of Robert's abandonment. What are you doing? Preparing. Samuel ran a hand through his hair. Brennan says our best defense is to prove that Robert abandoned you completely, that he forfeited his rights as a husband and father through his own actions. And if we cannot prove it, Samuel looked at her for a long moment. Then we find another way, he said. I will not let you lose Lily, Clara. I will not let Robert take you back. Whatever it costs, whatever I have to do, I will protect you both. Clara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Why, she whispered. Why would you risk so much for me? Samuel stood and crossed to her. He took her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Because I love you, he said simply. Because you and Lily have become my family. Because I have spent 2 years living in the shadow of death, and you brought me back into the light. He leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead, gentle and reverent. We will get through this, he said. Together, Clara closed her eyes and let herself believe him. Just for a moment, just for one night. Tomorrow the battle would begin. But tonight she was not alone. The weeks that followed were a blur of preparation and anxiety. Brennan worked tirelessly gathering evidence and lining up witnesses. Dr. Mercer agreed to testify about Lily's illness and Clara's desperate efforts to save her. Maggie would speak to Clara's character and the propriety of her behavior in Samuel's house. Even Tommy Gallagher, the shy young man who had once asked Clara to teach him how to talk to girls, came forward to explain the true nature of her advertisement. But Crane was working just as hard. He sent investigators to dig into Clara's past. He interviewed neighbors from the tenement, gathering every scrap of gossip and rumor he could find. He built a case that painted Clara as a calculating seductress who had deliberately ensnared a wealthy widower while her faithful husband toiled in the goldfields. It was lies. It was lies. But lies repeated often enough have a way of becoming truth in the minds of those who want to believe them. The night before the trial, Clara found Samuel in his study again. But this time he was not working. He was standing by the window looking out at the snow-covered garden, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Are you all right?" Clara asked. Samuel did not turn around. "I was thinking about Eleanor." Clara felt a pang of something she refused to call jealousy. What about her, about what she would think of all this? Samuel finally turned to face her. She was not a fighter, Eleanor. She believed in kindness, in gentleness, in turning the other cheek. "I do not think she would approve of what I am about to do." "What are you about to do?" "Whatever it takes." Samuel's eyes were hard. Brennan discovered something about Reverend Crawford. Something that could destroy him. Clara remembered the sanctimonious minister who had led the charge against her. What did he find? Crawford has been having an affair with Cordelia Ashworth for over a year. Clara's breath caught. "That is why she has been so determined to destroy us. She sees me as competition." "Perhaps." Samuel swirled the whiskey in his glass. "Brennan wants to use it to threaten Crawford with exposure if he testifies against us. But that would make us no better than them." Clara crossed to him and took the glass from his hand. "Then do not use it," she said. "We have the truth. We have witnesses. We have each other. Let that be enough. And if it is not, then we will face whatever comes together." Clara took his hands in hers. "I did not fall in love with a man who wins by destroying others. I fell in love with a man who stopped for a stranger in the snow. Do not become someone else to save me." Samuel looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her close and held her tight. "I love you," he said against her hair. "I love you too." They stood there in the firelight, two people facing an uncertain future, drawing strength from each other. Tomorrow would bring the trial. Tomorrow would bring the truth. And tomorrow, one way or another, their fate would be decided. The Cook County Courthouse was an imposing building of gray stone, its facade blackened by years of Chicago soot. Crowds gathered on the steps, drawn by the promise of scandal. Reporters clustered near the doors, their notebooks ready, their pencils sharp. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Clara sat at the defense table beside Samuel and Mr. Brennan. She wore a simple blue dress the color of a winter sky, and the gold locket Samuel had given her hung at her throat. Her hands were folded in her lap, her back straight, her chin high. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. Across the aisle, Robert sat with Victor Crane. He was dressed in a new suit, his hair slicked back, his expression carefully composed into wounded righteousness. The perfect picture of a betrayed husband. Clara could not look at him. If she looked at him, she might scream. Judge Henry Whitfield presided over the proceedings. He was a man in his 60s, with a shock of white hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. He had known Samuel's father, Brennan had told her. He was fair. He would listen to the evidence. But fairness was not always enough. Crane spoke first. He painted a picture of Robert as a devoted husband who had gone west to seek his fortune for his family's sake. A man who had labored in the goldfields, dreaming of the day he could return to his wife and child. A man who had come home to find his wife living in another man's house, wearing another man's gifts, sleeping under another man's roof. The words were poison, each one designed to twist the truth into something ugly. "Mrs. Dawson claims her husband abandoned her," Crane said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "But where is the evidence? Letters can be lost. Money can go astray. The roads between California and Chicago are long and dangerous. My client did everything in his power to support his family from afar." He turned to face Clara, and his smile was predatory. "The real question," he continued, "is not whether Mr. Dawson was a faithful husband. The real question is whether Mrs. Dawson was a faithful wife." Brennan objected. The judge overruled, and the trial continued. Witnesses came and went. Neighbors from the tenement who testified to seeing Samuel visit Clara's room. Mrs. Ashworth, who spoke of her dear friend Eleanor and how devastated she would be to see her husband so deceived. Reverend Crawford, who thundered about the sanctity of marriage and the sin of adultery. Clara sat through it all, her face pale but composed, Her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her fingernails left marks on her palms. Then it was Brennan's turn. He called Dr. Mercer, who described finding Lily near death and Clara desperate to save her. He called Maggie, who testified that Clara and Samuel had never behaved improperly, that Clara slept in a separate wing, that the household staff had never seen anything untoward. And he called Tommy Gallagher. The young man was nervous on the stand, his cheeks flushed, his voice shaking. But he told his story clearly. "I went to see Mrs. Dawson because of her advertisement," he said. "But it was not what people think. She did not offer me anything improper. She just taught me how to talk to a girl I liked." He smiled shyly. "I married that girl last month. Mrs. Dawson was the one who helped make it happen." The courtroom murmured. Crane's expression flickered with annoyance. Then Brennan called Clara to the stand. She walked to the witness box on legs that felt like water. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. And then she told her story. She told them about Robert leaving, about the months of silence, about Lily's illness, the desperate search for help, the advertisement that had brought Samuel into her life. He did not ask for anything. Clara said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. He did not want anything. He just wanted to help, because someone should have helped him once and no one did. She looked across the courtroom at Samuel and their eyes met. "I love him," Clara said. "I will not pretend otherwise. But I did not betray my marriage. My marriage was betrayed by the man who abandoned me, the man who left me with nothing while he chased gold in California, the man who only came back when he learned I had found someone who actually cared about me." The courtroom was silent. Crane stood for cross-examination, but before he could speak, something unexpected happened. Robert rose from his seat. "Stop," he said. Crane whirled. "Mr. Dawson, sit down." "No," Robert's face was pale, his hands trembling. He looked at Clara, and for the first time since he had returned, she saw something human in his eyes. "I need to say something." Judge Whitfield leaned forward. "Mr. Dawson, this is highly irregular." "Please, Your Honor." Robert's voice cracked. "Just let me speak." The judge considered for a moment, then he nodded. Robert walked to the front of the courtroom. He stood there, facing the crowd, facing the judge, facing the wife he had abandoned. And then he told the truth. "I lied," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silent courtroom everyone heard. "I did not go to California to make a fortune for my family. I went because I was a coward." He took a deep breath. "I had debts. Creditors were threatening me. I was supposed to be a husband and a father, but I did not know how. So I ran. I told myself I was doing it for Clara and Lily, but that was a lie. I was doing it for myself." Clara stared at him, unable to speak. "I did not write because I was ashamed. I did not send money because I did not have any. For months I lived in mining camps, barely surviving, telling myself that someday I would strike it rich and everything would be fine." He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "And then I did strike it rich. I found gold. And I thought I could come back and pick up where I left off. I thought Clara would be waiting for me, grateful for my return." He looked at Clara and his eyes were wet, but she was not waiting. She had built a new life. She had found someone who actually deserved her. And instead of being happy for her, I wanted to destroy her. Because if I could not have her, no one could. The courtroom was utterly still. Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. Clara recognized it. Their wedding portrait. The two of them young and hopeful, believing in a future that had never come. "I loved you," Robert said to Clara. "In my own weak, selfish way, I loved you. But I was never the husband you deserved. I was never the father Lily needed. And Samuel Hartwell has been both of those things in ways I never could." He turned to face the judge. "I withdraw my complaint, Your Honor. I will sign whatever papers are necessary to give Clara her divorce and relinquish my rights to Lily." He looked at Clara one last time. "Be happy," he said, "happier than you ever were with me." Then he walked out of the courtroom, and Clara never saw him again. The silence lasted for what felt like an eternity. Then Judge Whitfield cleared his throat. In light of Mr. Dawson's statement, he said, "In the evidence presented, I find no grounds for the claim of alienation of affection. The case is dismissed." He looked at Clara and Samuel, and something softened in his stern expression. "Furthermore, I will expedite the divorce proceedings and recommend that Mr. Hartwell's petition for adoption of the child Lily be approved." He banged his gavel. "This court is adjourned." The courtroom erupted. Clara sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. She had prepared herself for the worst. She had steeled herself for loss and heartbreak and a future without hope. And instead she had won. Samuel was beside her in an instant, pulling her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her. "It is over," he said. "Clara, it is over." She buried her face in his chest and wept. As the crowd dispersed, Clara caught a glimpse of Mrs. Ashworth's face across the courtroom. The woman who had schemed and plotted and sent poison pen letters was staring at Clara with an expression of utter disbelief. Her carefully constructed world of manipulation and judgment had crumbled in a single afternoon. Their eyes met. Clara did not gloat. She did not smirk. She simply nodded once and turned away. She later learned that Mrs. Ashworth left Chicago that summer, moving to New York after rumors of her affair with Reverend Crawford became public knowledge. The hypocrite who had thundered about the sanctity of marriage was quietly removed from his pulpit and disappeared into obscurity. The congregation that had once hung on his every word turned their backs on him with the same righteous fury he had once directed at Clara. Clara never spoke of them again. They were not worth the words. 3 months later, on a warm June afternoon, Clara stood before a mirror in a room filled with sunlight. She was wearing a cream-colored dress, simple but elegant, with a delicate lace collar and pearl buttons. Her hair was pinned up with fresh flowers, and the gold locket hung at her throat. Through the window, she could see the garden of Samuel's house transformed for the occasion. White chairs arranged in neat rows, an arbor covered with roses, and at the end of the aisle, Samuel himself waiting for her. Maggie appeared in the doorway, Lily in her arms. The baby was 14 months old now, healthy and happy, her cheeks pink and her eyes bright. "You look beautiful," Maggie said. Clara smiled. "I feel beautiful." It was true. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. Not the desperate woman who had posted that advertisement. Not the frightened mother who had watched her daughter dying. Not the scandal that had set all of Chicago talking. Just Clara. A woman in love. A woman with a future. The ceremony was small and intimate. Dr. Mercer was there and Tommy Gallagher with his new wife, Bridget. A few of Samuel's business associates. Maggie and the household staff. Pastor Abraham Finch, a young Methodist minister who had never judged Clara for her circumstances, performed the ceremony. Marriage, he said, is the joining of two souls who have found in each other something worth fighting for. Samuel and Clara have faced trials that would have broken lesser people. They have endured gossip and judgment and the cruelty of those who should have shown compassion. And through it all, they have held on to each other. He smiled at them both. That is what love is. Not the absence of hardship, but the presence of someone who makes hardship bearable. Samuel took Clara's hands in his. "Clara," he said, "I spent 2 years believing I would never feel joy again. You proved me wrong. You and Lily have given me a reason to hope, a reason to dream, a reason to live. I promise to cherish you, protect you, and love you for all the days of my life." Clara felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Samuel," she said, "I thought I had nothing left to give. You showed me that love is not about what we have, but about what we choose. I choose you. Today and forever." Samuel reached for her hand. On his own finger, he still wore the simple silver band he had worn since Eleanor died, the ring he had been turning nervously that first night in the tavern. Now slowly he slipped it off. "This was Eleanor's ring to me," he said quietly. "But she would want you to have it now. She would want our family to continue." He placed the silver band on Clara's finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Clara placed a new gold band on his, a symbol of their new beginning. "By the power vested in me," Pastor Finch declared, "I pronounce you husband and wife." Samuel kissed her, and the small crowd applauded. But the day was not complete. After the ceremony, they went to the courthouse one final time. Judge Whitfield himself signed the adoption papers. "Lily Dawson," he announced, "is hereby legally adopted by Samuel Hartwell. From this day forward, she shall be known as Lily Hartwell." Samuel lifted Lily from Clara's arms. The baby laughed and grabbed his nose, and Samuel's face broke into the widest smile Clara had ever seen. "Welcome to the family, little one," he said. Clara watched them, her husband and her daughter, and felt her heart overflow. That evening, after the guests had gone and Lily was asleep in her nursery, Clara and Samuel stood on the balcony of their home, looking out at Chicago spread before them. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. The city sparkled in the fading light, its buildings and streets and people all going about their lives unaware of the miracle that had happened in this house. "Are you happy?" Samuel asked. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. I did not know it was possible to be this happy, she said. I thought happiness was something that happened to other people. People who were luckier or better or more deserving than me. You deserve everything, Samuel said. He wrapped his arm around her. And I intend to spend the rest of my life proving it to you. Clara smiled. What if I said I already believe you? Then I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt it. They stood there in the golden light, two people who had found each other in the darkest of circumstances and built something beautiful from the ashes. Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here, the desperate advertisement, the stranger who had stopped when no one else would, the love that had grown from kindness into something unbreakable. She had not been saved. She had been chosen. And she had chosen back. Years later, when people asked Clara how she had found happiness, she would tell them about the winter of 1879, about the cold and the hunger and the fear, about a baby dying and a mother with nothing left to give, and about a man who had stopped. Love is not about perfection, she would say. It is not about having all the answers or never making mistakes. It is about choosing each other every day, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. She would look at Samuel still by her side after all those years and smile. I was lost in the snow, she would say, and he found me, not to save me, but to walk beside me. That is what love is. Someone who walks beside you through the storm. The house on Prairie Avenue became a home. Clara filled it with laughter and warmth, with the patter of little feet and the chaos of family life. Samuel stepped back from his business and learned to enjoy the simple pleasures he had denied himself for so long. Maggie stayed on becoming more like a beloved aunt than a servant, and Lily grew. She grew into a bright, curious child who asked 1,000 questions a day. She grew into a young woman who had her mother's strength and her adoptive father's kindness. She never knew the man who had given her life, but she knew the man who had saved it. Papa, she called Samuel, from the very first word. One spring afternoon, when Lily was 5 years old, Clara found her in the garden behind the house. The little girl was kneeling in the dirt, carefully planting something in a patch of freshly turned soil. What are you doing, sweetheart? Clara asked. Lily looked up with a bright smile. Planting lilies, she said. Papa planted the first ones the spring after you got married. He said they were your mama's favorite flower, and he wanted our garden to always have them. He says they grow from the mud, but stay white, like us. Clara felt her heart swell. She knelt beside her daughter and helped her pat the soil around the tiny bulbs. That is right, she said. Lilies are very special flowers. They remind us that beautiful things can grow even in the darkest places. Lily nodded solemnly. Papa says you are like a lily. You grew from something hard and became something beautiful. Clara laughed and pulled her daughter into a hug. Your papa is a very wise man. I know, Lily said matter-of-factly. That is why you married him. That night, Clara stood at the window of her bedroom, looking out at the garden where the lilies would soon bloom. Samuel came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? He asked. The beginning, Clara said, and the end, and everything in between. Samuel rested his chin on her shoulder. There is no end, he said, only new beginnings. Clara turned in his arms and looked up at him. The same face she had seen in the smoky tavern all those years ago. The same sad eyes that had somehow seen her when no one else could. Only now the sadness was gone, replaced by peace. I love you, she said. I love you too. They stood there in the moonlight, holding each other, two people who had walked through fire and come out whole. Outside, the wind whispered through the garden, carrying the promise of spring. And somewhere in the soil, the lilies were already beginning to grow. Clara Dawson had once believed she was lost, forgotten, ruined by the world's cruelty. But she had learned something powerful in the arms of a man who chose kindness over possession. A broken past does not mean a broken future. Love, real love, grows even from the coldest winter. And the price of mercy in the end was not a price at all. It was a gift, the greatest gift either of them had ever received.